Hey there kids, it's me, MrCreepyPasta. I just want to say about one quick thing before we get started on tonight's story, and that's Origins of Delusion. It's a new book from N.M. Brown. Natalie Brown is the author of tonight's story and author of Origins of Delusion. It's a fantastic book. I actually have a copy of it myself, and I cannot push you guys enough to be able to pick up a copy on your own. It's available on Kindle and paperback on Amazon right now through the link in the description down below. And now, on to tonight's story. Hi, you've reached Aaron and Kate. We're not home right now, but leave a message and we'll get back to you. Thanks. Kate, this is your mother. You didn't call last night. You missed lunch with us today? I'm getting very worried. Please call us back, okay? I listened to the message and looked to my wife's face. Eyes glazed over, lips contorted, her fingers fall limply from their grasp on my arm. My hands continue to shake even after I let go of her neck, and she drops to the floor. Rage still burns through my veins while my heart continues to break. You're probably wondering what happened, or why I feel myself in the situation that I'm in. You also may already think that I'm a terrible person. Before you jump to any definite conclusions, let me tell you the whole story of how I got here. Kate and I met in our early 20s. She says it was love at first sight. She said she noticed me before I noticed her. We hung out after work one night, and that night turned into a relationship that lasted 8 years. She entered my bed and never left it. We seldom left each other's side. We lived together right away, always hung out together, and we even worked together a few jobs over the years. We had a wonderful life. We had a wonderful 5 years or so. Until we started to have children. That's when her depression started. She would withdraw, go quiet. Her silence was like ice too cold for me to touch. I couldn't understand why things couldn't still be happy with just us. I know how badly she wanted to be a mother. We still had each other. We had a connection we dreamt about for most of our young lives that some people never find. We started out with just the two of us, and we were happy. We could still be happy, just the two of us. After about 2 years, I made an appointment with a fertility clinic. We both needed to be checked to see what the holdup was. Well, they were able to find that her fallopian tubes were ravaged with cysts. They had to be removed. Right along with any hope or chance that we had of having our own biological child. Honestly, as terrible as it sounds to say, I'm glad that we went, because not because of the result, but because they were able to find a problem that Kate had, and they fixed it. I tried to be there for her. I tried to sympathize and help her cope. The upcoming winter season didn't seem to be helping either. We tried marriage counseling and individual therapy for her. I even spoke to a few adoption lawyers, asked about the process, give us options. It's not what she had planned, but I always supported her in her dreams. If she wanted a baby, I couldn't give it to her, then this was the next best option for me. She wouldn't hear of it, of course. Adoption was like a dirty word for her. She actually cringed when I first said it to her. She couldn't handle the idea of raising someone that she didn't nurture and grow in her womb. But forget about saving another child's quality of life. She was too narcissistic for that. I'll only be a disappointment to them, Aaron. If I don't feel that connection, they will sense it. That's not fair to them. You raise a child for the majority of its life, and that's just fine. However, when they grow to a certain age, they want to know all about their birth parents. They want to know everything about them. You have no idea how many birth parents pop up wanting to know their kids, and wouldn't you know it? It always seems to happen after they turn 18, she would say. No matter how I went about the situation, it always ended in tears, nights on the couch, silence of a frostbitten atmosphere. She seemed to have started to come around after a couple of months. I came home and found her listening to music and swirling around the kitchen tiles in her socks. She had painted her fingernails a metallic baby blue in honor of wintertime, she told me excitedly. To me, her painting her nails was a great thing. I mean, if she was pampering herself, it meant she was happy. She was present. She was my Kate again. I couldn't help but smile when I saw the woman that I had married so many years ago. She even told me she joined a social media group about infertility, and she loved the support she was getting. It gave her strength to hear other people's struggles, get her to share her own to people who utterly understood. Yeah, I was happy for her. I wanted to tell her that I was there for her too. I also understood. I was happy that if she shared with anyone, it needed to be me, her partner. I was the only person sitting in the chair when the doctor told us. I had visions and dreams crushed too. She didn't need to hear that right now, though. No. See, now she was happy, so I was happy. You know, she certainly was getting support. Her phone would constantly vibrate in notifications and messages, sometimes at all hours of the night. I figured, well, it was a big group, and it's not the same time everywhere in the world. She must have set it to notify her every time someone posts something or likes something of hers. She needs support from women right now, women who understand. Katie took it very seriously. I'd hand over her phone when it was near me. Went off, she'd give me looks. Looks like a kid gives his peeking neighbor during a test before he covers his paper so he can't copy. Hey, babe, she said, looking at me with dancing eyes. You know, some of the women of the group are talking about picking a weekend and doing a spa. You know, one of those meet and greets. More people in contact with each other, and for women to get pampered and cry on each other and things like that. I mean, it's not like we have to find anyone to watch our kids. She tried to joke with a pained smile. Does that sound like something you'd like to go to with me? I knew if I hesitated too long, it was going to be bad, one way or another. I would have to take off work, and God knows where this meeting place was going to be. The chances that it would be in our city, hell, even our state, they were slim to none. Honestly, all the crying would be so unsettling and awkward for me, and yet, I mean, yes, I do love my wife. She's the only one I've ever loved in my life. However, infertility was already something I had made peace with and accepted months ago. I couldn't bring the level of understanding to the table that was needed for this. Would you like me to? Or do you need to be with your new women friends? I mean, I honestly wanted to go and support you if you need me. Though it would be super awkward if I was one of the only men there. I mean, there are men in the group, right? When I said that, she tried to stifle a giggle by biting her lower lip. She shook her head no, and then burst into giggles, apologizing in between breaths. Not really, no. They're just a couple, and those are mainly joint accounts. Aaron, you don't have to go. I will totally be okay and understand, but I think this will really help me. And besides, this will really give us a chance to miss each other. Sure, I'll come back a refreshed woman. I won't think you're unsupportive or uncaring. It turned out it was 2 weeks away in the next state over. From where we were located, it would only take her 3.5 hours by car. She would have no problem getting there and having her weekend and then driving back when she woke up on Monday. I was going to surprise her by making a meal plan and rearranging the living room while she was gone. I wanted to take care of all the little tasks that she nagged me about, but I never got to it while I had the time to myself. The time came for her to leave, and I sent her off with a kiss and my favorite t-shirt. You wear this on your saddest cry day, I told her. I want to still be there to wipe the tears, even if I can't be. Again, she got a pained look on her face, but she shook it off with a smile. Thank you for understanding. I'll miss you. I'll call you every day, she told me. I kissed her. Then she left, driving off into her weekend of healing. After picking up and cleaning the floors, I was almost ready to start rearranging our living room. I had been putting off cleaning the dust from the ceiling and fans for way too long. Neither of us really wanted to do it, but I was the taller one, so the task generally fell on me. She'd be so happy. She'd be so proud that I did that when she came home. A refreshed Kate came home to a refreshed home. She called at around 9 p.m. to let me know that she got there all right and that she missed me already. We blew phone kisses after a knock at the door. "Hey, that's my friend. I'll call you in the morning, okay? I love you," she said, before getting off the phone. I hope this would help her, and help us, be what we once were. Around the middle of the next day, Saturday, she informed me that her phone was dying. I looked at the counter and saw both of our wall chargers lying there. So I called her and told her to just use the car charger, but not to leave it in while the car was turned off because A, someone could steal her phone, and B, it could kill the battery. I missed her, and would do so, but I really didn't want to drive 3 hours just to jump her car and drive home again. She didn't know cars, and you can't depend on strangers, especially another state away. Even if it was only hours from home, she promised me that she'd be fine, that she couldn't talk long, but she loved me, and she missed me like crazy. The rest of the day, when I called, it would go straight to voicemail. I was thankful she was able to tell me what had happened, so I wouldn't worry when I suddenly couldn't reach her. It was thoughtful of her to let me know that I wouldn't lose my mind with intrusive thoughts. I mean, she hadn't ever met these people before. They could have been anyone. Who knows the conclusions my mind could have jumped to. Should have made sure that she packed the charger, I thought at the time. I sent her a "have fun, our bed is cold without you" text from work. I wanted my message of love to be the first thing she saw when her phone had more battery. I couldn't wait to smell her hair again. Before long, it was Monday, the day she was supposed to come home. We chatted excitedly on the phone while she packed. Before long, I rushed off the phone to get one last thing for her arrival. Her home missed her as much as I did. It was so much darker without her here, the emptiness swallowing me. I'd be glad to have her in my arms, So I bought some Reunited and I Feel So Good alcohol for us to enjoy. And then I went home and I waited. She walked through the door, I gave her a hug, I lifted her off the ground. She did look different. I couldn't place it, but it was different. It almost had the glow of her being centered, finally able to find some peace with herself. I was glad for that. We had both needed that for her. Seeing her so rejuvenated, it made me feel the same. We relished our time together. We were so wrapped up that she completely forgot to say anything about the house. And that's okay though. She's here now. That's all I ever wanted. The holidays came and they went with Kate seeming like a bulb growing brighter every day. I was thankful that she was able to turn it into positivity. For some childless couples, the holiday season can be a big slap in the face. Her group even did a Secret Santa. One of the members sending Kate a very name brand, awfully expensive, very out of budget gift. And I was happy for her. She deserved nice things. She really lucked out on a Secret Santa. And one day, I got a call when Kate was in the shower. It was her mom saying that her father was having some chest pains, so she was taking him to the hospital. I relayed the message to her. She rushed out. I handed her some clothes, her purse, the keys. I lovingly told her to keep me updated on her way out. I hoped my father-in-law was going to be okay. I would have gone with her, but I had work in a little over an hour. I heard a buzzing, and I looked around our room to see where it was coming from. It sounded like a phone, so I checked mine. It wasn't mine. I got on the floor, peered under the bed, and there was Kate's phone. It probably fell out from her purse when I picked it up and handed it to her, so I couldn't help myself. I unlocked her screen. What I saw made the color drain from my body and curdled my stomach instantly. Katie. I had so much fun over this weekend. I can't believe how amazing everything was. I didn't even want to sleep. It's crazy how things went. Now we know. Alan. Oh my god, me too. I felt so comfortable with you. 3.5 days, it's like we had been together for years. Katie, I think this group is going to have monthly meetings if I can manage. We've been talking for so long, then we met and it was like an instant connection. I can't wait to see you again. I knew I loved you, and then it was confirmed for me 100% when I saw you. I can't wait to meet your son. Alan, me too. It's all I can think about. I know that my kid will love you just as much as I do. You are perfection, the total package. A trophy to be shown and proud of. Say you're hot would be an insult. Your beauty in every way. Now that we know it's real, you have to work on your end of the situation. I won't be played for a chump. If you do love me and want me, you need to do some decision making. This isn't a game and it's not a fairy tale. If your husband makes you happy, I'm out ski. But if you want me, do the work. Text me when it's okay to text back. I love you, gorgeous. I read the message repeatedly until the words blurred through my tears. My mind raced to try to think of something, anything to make this look different from what it obviously was. I mean, she knew when she asked me to come with her that I would say no. That's why she made it so easy for me. We had never taken separate getaways before. All our vacations were always taken together. She had changed. She was happy. And now I knew it was because of him. She had healed all right. Healed herself right into someone else's family. She reacts like I say the word abortion instead of adoption. And now she can't wait to meet his son? This was too much. She had thought that I wouldn't understand her healing process. She was fucking right. There was nothing to make me understand this. When was she going to tell me? Was she going to tell me? Would I just come home one day to a note saying, adios, Aaron, that's been fun. I raced to the trash can and I threw up. My love turning to bile in my throat, spewing out. All her words, all of the love, all the plans and promises turning to poison in my heart. Every memory seemed like a lie, every struggle unfelt by her. Did she even want children with me? Did she ever love me? What was the point of all this? Every single question branched off into 5 more questions, attacking my mind like a murder of crows. I lit a cigarette on my way out to my car, drove to the corner store and bought a lot of beer. See, I never drank, but if there was ever a time for it, now was that time. I chugged one in the parking lot and opened another for the ride home. My father always said that the road to a man's self-destruction always began with a woman. It looked like he was right, I thought, as I threw a crushed can out of the window. I lit another cigarette as I pulled into the driveway and saw her car there. Without a thought or a care, I drank 2 more before going inside. Lit cigarette and all. She was sitting there on our bed with her phone laying in front of her with a screen lit up. Her eyes widened when she saw me smoking in the house. She opened her mouth to say something about it, but then quickly closed it, realizing the shots weren't hers to call here. She wasn't upset or crying, she just looked. She looked numb. I never wanted to hit a woman in my life, but my hand throbbed with the desire to. I rubbed my hand to my jeans to try to disperse the energy. You can tell Alan it's safe for him to message you now. He can message you anytime he wants. And it's not my problem anymore. You've never been who I thought you were. The past 8 years were a lie. I slurred as my words turned to blubbering tears. I didn't want to give her the satisfaction of seeing my heart break, but I couldn't help it. Through all my anger and all my hate, I still saw her there sitting on the bed. She looked so small and lost, and all I wanted to do was hold her. That wouldn't happen, though, not ever again if I could help it. She finally cried and apologized. She promised that she would end it and block him and get rid of social media entirely to work on us. She said she wanted to be a better wife and got lost. She said she got mixed up and the situation became too big for her to get out of. She needed help. She actually had the gall to tell me that she was glad she got caught and now I could help her get out of it. She said she never stopped loving me and never loved him. I felt neglected by you, Aaron. I felt like I lost you and myself when we couldn't have kids. I thought I had found myself and found our life, but I was wrong. I went to leave you and I couldn't do it, Aaron. I will do anything to fix this. We can come out of this stronger and with a better understanding of each other. We spent an entire week apart. Me taking a trip of my own, out of state to clear my head. She went to my parents and cried to them about what she had done. She apologized for hurting their son, asking for their forgiveness, figuring it would eventually lead to me. Though manipulative and inconsiderate to my parents' mental health, it worked. She picked me up from the airport, and again, I hugged her so hard I lifted her off the ground. We went home and reconnected. We talked for hours into the night, and then again when we woke up the next day. We had worked a lot out and decided what we needed from each other. To get past this, not let it ruin us. The only thing I asked of her was to block his number from her phone, and to never, under any circumstances, positive or negative, have contact with him again. This was my time to heal. That was the only way I was going to be able to do it. I wouldn't forgive her twice. Though I didn't tell her at the time. She did ruin us. I saw Alan's picture next to the message, so I knew his face. Every time I would go to kiss her or touch her, I would see his face like a ghost. Alan making her laugh. Him kissing her forehead. Him making her sweat. I hated it. I wanted to hate her. But I couldn't. Despite everything, she was still the woman I loved and always would be, even if I did leave her. We would get through this. And a part of me already died when I found out what she did. Maybe that part will grow back stronger. Better. A few more months went by. Valentine's Day came and went with no issue. I was nervous about it, but Kate tried her best to make sure it was a good day for me. For us. I started to see the ghost of Alan less and less. Kate was turning into the woman I married again. It was terrible that she needed this to get back to that, but as long as I had her, we could work it out. She would never leave me again. She promised. She had deleted social media as promised, and Alan's number remained blocked. My heart started to slowly heal. I was well on my way, in love with her again. Not like nothing had happened, but like we didn't let it break us. I stopped checking up on her as much. She felt terrible about it. Seemed to punish herself more every day than I ever could, so we let it fade into the past. Hey Aaron, can you please look at my phone? I think I have some sort of virus. She asked me, concerned. I laughed at her and joked, you know how you get those, don't you? Too much freaky peeky. The kind of sick shit have you been looking at? She slapped my arm, giggling on her way to our kitchen. No! Come on, I can't get any of my pictures to load and I want to send some to my mom. You're off today, please? I told her I would help her and to give me an hour with her phone. I'd back up her pictures and factory reset it if the problem was too bad. I transferred her phone over to our computer just in case. Then I unplugged her phone, looked through her messages to make sure she didn't lose any important numbers or pictures if I reset it. I went to the text settings to see if there was any locked or starred messages with pictures of us. I saw an option on her phone that said blocked messages. Very wary, but overwhelming curiosity, I opened the folder. There was so many. All of them from Alan. Haven't heard from you. Sorry how I act sometimes. You know I love you. I just think that when two people want to be together, they should do anything they can to do so. It's hard for me to imagine the situation you're in at home, and I just get frustrated. Tell me you're thinking of me. I love you, sugar tits. I'm so lucky to have you. I thought of you last night before going to bed, but that's nothing new. Just want you to know, no matter how mad I get, I can never stop loving you. And I'll never turn my back on you. You look beautiful. I love talking to you. It's been the best part of my day for months. Good morning. You're rocking it today, babe. They went on and on like that. My mind snapped. The frail bandages holding my fragile heart and mentality all fell away. I looked over at her across from the room. My breath was coming in faster and bigger huffs, and my face was burning hot. She looked at me confused. What? Before she finished her word, I was out of my chair and in front of her. The time for words has ended now. I only asked you for one thing. Just one fucking thing. I stood up to leave, and she launched up from the couch, throwing herself to me. Aaron, please, I don't understand. We've come so far. I worked so hard. Why would I do that just to talk to him again? I haven't been talking to him. Don't go anywhere. I know I fucked up last year, but I wouldn't do that again. Her sobs grew louder. No way. There's no way that she gets to be the one who cries here. She doesn't get to feel anything but shame right now. I'm the one who should be crying. But of course, everything has always been about her. I can't even have feelings without her trying to steal them, so she could end up being the victim. I have to stop it. Get her to be quiet. I slammed my hand over her mouth, but she still sobbed, soaking my hand in snot and tears, and her wails grew louder and louder, repeating the same words over and over. It's as if she thought the more she said them, the more I would have to believe her. The only thing that I do believe are that I can't bounce back from this twice, that I can't live with her, and I can't live without her, as the saying goes. So my hands dropped from her mouth to her throat, the other coming up to meet it. Now it was my turn to feel. I cried and I sobbed as I squeezed my hands together tighter and tighter. Fragmented wedding vows grudging out through my teeth as I heaved with tears. I wanted my face to be the last thing she saw as the life faded out of her eyes. Her wails turned to whimpers until finally barely any sound could escape at all. Till death do us part, darling. And I promise I won't be far behind. So that's how we got here. My mother-in-law's voice on the home answering machine, her daughter turning cold. By the minute on the floor, my hands are shaking. My sides are sore from the sobs. The light of my life is gone. Why did she have to do this again? She always said she was born to be my wife, that she would die for me, and well, here we are. She ended up being true to her word in one sense, at least, through all of this. I checked the block list again and see a new message from 18 minutes ago. I love the way you smell, it read. Enough of this shit. We have the call button on the message. It rings and rings until finally a woman picks up. Before I have any chance to answer, she starts yelling at me. You have to be some kind of stupid to continue to call after all you've done, Kate. The woman said my wife's name as if it was disgusting on her tongue. She continues. As far as his son and I are concerned, you might as well have driven the car that killed him. Do you know he has had messages set up pre-scheduled to send to you for 2 months? It's nice to know you have messages from him after he's dead, but what about your son? Heartless slut. She's going on and on. Hysterical with fury. I tune her out. I hang up the phone without a word. I really think about what she says. She said the words killed. And pre-scheduled messages. Kate was telling the truth. She hadn't contacted him. This also explained why he still went on as if they were together. It's really over. She was mine again. Oh my God, I've killed her. I run to the bathroom, rifling through the medicine cabinet and grab a bottle. I don't plan to call the police or turn myself in, but surely the neighbors heard the noise. They must have called them already anyway. I don't know if I'll have the courage. For now, I'm going to snuggle up to my sweetheart. I want to hold her for as long as I can and not let go. I hold her, I smell her hair as I wait for the knock to come on the door. They can try, but I'll never let her go. She'll never leave me again. She promised. Till death do us part, sweetheart. I first saw her when I was 10 years old. It was a rainy day, and I was gunning it home on my rusty bike to escape the chilling drizzle. She was dressed in a pair of pale jeans and a dark gray coat, with her dirty blonde hair tied into a ponytail. She seemed to be in no hurry to escape the liquid assault. Her blue eyes trailed me as I neared her, and she smiled. She smiled at me as I gave a courteous "good afternoon, ma'am," in passing. As soon as she nodded her head in acknowledgement of my presence, I knew I had a crush on her. My very first crush, actually. But I kept going, needing to be home by dinner. The reason for my presence in that part of town was the sudden disappearance of a friend, a 19-year-old guy named Johnny, the older brother of a friend my age named Brian. A sick boy from birth, suffering from asthma and having a weak immune system, Brian needed constant supervision. Johnny was by his side at all times, taking care of him. Needless to say, we kids were ecstatic about having a senior in our ranks. We loved Johnny, and we invited Brian everywhere with us in hopes his older brother would follow. Whenever we played games, it turned into an all-out war to decide which team Johnny would play on. Our favorite game was to play soccer. More than once did Johnny take us all on by himself. With his lanky legs and superior speed, we'd rarely defeat him. Our last game together was soccer, actually. And Brian decided to play for the first time in a long while. He was usually relegated to either position of goalie or referee. We were a hair away from scoring on Johnny, who had no goalie of his own. Another kid led the charge, with me and Brian by his sides. Johnny came from behind, fast as lightning, ready to intercept the ball. I decided to slow him down. The other kid passed the ball to Brian to score. Brian caught it and advanced towards the goal while we held Johnny back. But before he could make the kick, Brian stopped dead in his tracks and grabbed his own chest. He began coughing, falling to his knees as his breathing grew heavy and his face went pale. "Time out!" Johnny yelled. And the urgency in his voice froze all of us. We were familiar enough with the event to know how to react, but that didn't make the panic go away. I ran to Brian to hold him up, and Johnny bolted to the sidelines. He got Brian's pack, opened it, and spilled its contents on the ground. He rifled through notebooks, water bottles, and pens until he found the inhaler. As soon as he got his hands on it, he rushed back to Brian. He pressed the inhaler on his brother's mouth, gently talking to him as Brian breathed in the puffs of medicine. After the crisis passed, he took Brian on his back. "Well, boys, it looks like we'll have to cut today's game a bit short," he said with a wide smile. "But let's call it a draw. We'll have a rematch the next time." We all accepted Johnny's decision, but I'll admit I was bummed out about it. I mean, I like Brian. He was a good kid, a great friend, but I hated how he ruined our fun, and I hated myself for hating him. Still, I didn't complain. I gathered his things off the ground, stashed them haphazardly in his pack, and handed it to Johnny. We said our goodbyes, and we went our separate ways. Only later did I find out that I forgot something, perhaps the most important thing in Brian's pack. His inhaler. Johnny dropped it on the ground and left it behind, only realizing his mistake when they got home. He left Brian with their parents, got on his bike, and returned to the field to get it. The last anyone saw of him was an old man that lived nearby. But Johnny never made it back home. We found out about it the next day at school when Brian was a no-show. The police had been notified, and they did a thorough search of the area by noon. They found Johnny's bike in some bushes, and found the inhaler still in the field. There was no sign of him. No witnesses, no tracks. Not even a scent trail for the canines to follow. It was like he vanished into thin air. Rumors spread in the small town like wildfire. Anything from Johnny running away to being abducted by aliens or human traffickers. But no one knew anything for sure. The police kept trying, doubling and tripling their efforts in the search area. Even my parents and older sister joined in the evenings when they got home from work. And yet, they weren't able to find a trace of him. Us kids would gather in the field, both to offer emotional support to Brian and hoping for Johnny to come back, or for us to find a clue the adults missed. Needless to say, we had no such luck, and after 3 days of being gone, everyone suspected the worst. It was early fall, and that meant rain on a semi-regular basis. It rained the evening when Johnny went missing, and it rained 3 days later when us kids were gathered in the field. The droplets started out small and barely noticeable, but we knew that it would turn into a downpour any moment. So we said our goodbyes to Brian and left. On my way home is when I had my first encounter with the girl. The second encounter came a week after Johnny's disappearance, in the same field. As dusk came, the other kids left one by one, leaving only me and Brian behind. We spent some time talking, reminiscing about his older brother, and Brian let the floodgates open for the first time. His cries carried so much anguish that I couldn't abstain anymore. My tears started flowing as well, shed for our friend whose fate remained unknown. I don't think I felt as sad and defeated as back then in my life. Me and Brian wanted to spend a bit more time out there to let our emotions run dry, but it started raining again. "I better get going," he said, rubbing tears and snot away from his sleeve. "Don't need my mom to worry for me too." "Be careful," I told him. He hopped on his bicycle and took off. But I decided to stay a while longer. Rain be damned. I couldn't go back home yet. It didn't feel right. So I waited. I waited as rain fell around me in bigger and bigger droplets, facing the forest beyond the field and the town. Although we used the field to play various games, it wasn't exactly a stadium. Back in the 50s, when big swaths of trees were cleared to make room for houses, the planners overestimated their ability to sell lands to the prospective homeowners. That left an almost perfect ring of flat land around the town, terrain ideal for us kids to play. Our field was one such place, a square of grassy terrain cut out from the surrounding forest. No lawn, no goals, no lines drawn with chalk. We brought our own cinder blocks to mark the terrain, and we gathered them in a pile when we were done playing. I sat on that pile, elbows on my knees, and my face between my palms, watching the sun setting over the forest. The rain picked up a bit, but I was too engrossed in my memories of Johnny to care. I was so out of it that I didn't notice the girl approach me from behind. She laid a hand on my shoulder, giving me a good scare. "Hey," she greeted, and her voice was angelic. "Good evening, ma'am," I answered. "What are you doing out here? You'll catch a cold." Seeing the sorrowful expression I gave in answer, her smile died down. I composed myself and explained the reason for my presence in the field, feeling a knot forming in my throat as I spoke. She sat on a cinder block next to me, listening to my story and hanging on every word I spoke. Water drained her features, flowing down her hair and slicking it. Her clothes were drenched, sticking to her skin, making her look like she just came out of a swimming pool. I could barely focus on telling her Johnny's story, as my mind ran rampant with questions. Who was she? How was she so drenched when the rain was pretty tame? How have I not seen her around before? But I pushed the questions aside and finished spinning my tale, and she gave me a thoughtful nod of her head. "I'm so sorry to hear that," she said, and her voice was filled with genuine empathy for my struggle. "But I'm sure they'll find him soon. You should be going home. It's doing you no good being out here in the cold." With that, she got up and left. And I did the same soon after. She was right. Catching a cold would have done no one any good. I got home half an hour later, changed out of my wet clothes into clean pajamas, and went to sleep. That night I dreamt of the field, of us playing soccer on a warm, sunny day and having a great time. Johnny was there, kicking our asses as usual. But halfway through the match, something happened. Everyone else froze as rain began to fall around us, out of the blue. Their heads turned slowly and their eyes were filled with terror. I followed their collective gaze, scared of what I'd find, and my eyes landed on the girl. She stood ominously in the forest's edge, the finer details of her body hidden by low-hanging foliage and darkness, but I could still recognize her. She had a wide grin on her lips, and her blue eyes shined weakly in the darkness. She lifted a finger and beckoned us closer, but no one moved. No one except for Johnny, who walked towards her with hesitant steps. The girl pulled back a few steps, entering the forest, and Johnny picked up his pace. Seeing him leave us behind, memories flooded me. I remembered that he went missing, that he never returned, and that we didn't find a single trace of him. Certain that Johnny would die if I didn't intervene, I took off after them. The girl ran away from us, and she was nimble despite the thick forest in her path. It felt like we were chasing a mirage, a ghost that wasn't concerned with the obstacles in its path. In a matter of moments, I lost sight of her, and I could barely see Johnny's back as well. His lanky legs carried him at a pace that my stubby feet couldn't match. But I was determined not to let him and Brian down, so I powered forward. With sharp inhales that burned my lungs, I forced myself to run faster. The deeper into the forest we got, the harder the rain came down, bringing strong gusts of wind with it. The weather got so bad I couldn't see 10 feet in front of myself, but I didn't lose track of Johnny. As the downpour reached a crescendo, powerful enough to nearly blow me off my feet, I caught sight of the girl. She stopped running, allowing Johnny to catch up to her. She was in the shore of a small pond with one foot in the water and one on the uncertain dirt surrounding it. Johnny neared her, and she opened her arms for him, latching them around his neck. In each other's embrace, pelted by rain and ruffled by wind, they kissed. Johnny leaned into her and she pulled him in tighter, their bodies pressed against each other in the throes of passion. I didn't know what to do, what to think about the situation. So I froze, with her lips pressed on Johnny's. She looked over her shoulder at me. She was grinning, so wide it reached her eyes and arched her eyebrows. She gave me a wink, and then she jerked her whole body backwards in one swift motion, dragging Johnny along. They collapsed in the shallow water, with her vanishing under the waves and pulling Johnny under as well. Taken by surprise, he screamed and struggled as he sank. But he was gone in a heartbeat. I tried to move, to rush over and help him, but my feet felt like they wouldn't budge. Try as hard as I might, I couldn't move a single muscle. Even my voice got lost in my throat as I tried to yell out. I jolted awake, covered from head to toe in sweat. It was still dark outside, but my bedside clock showed that sunrise would come soon. I got dressed, I left the house post-haste, not waking anyone up to tell them I was leaving. The rain outside stopped. The only sounds in the streets were squeals of my bike as I pedaled as hard as I could. With the dream fresh in my mind, I made my way to the field. I jumped off the bike, leaving it behind as I ran into the forest. I followed the path as best I could, running even faster than I had in my dream. My guts were screaming at me, telling me how bad of an idea this was, but I couldn't stop. I got turned around a few times, the darkness of the night and the thick foliage disorienting me, but I found the clearing in a few minutes. The clouds above dispersed, allowing the moon to shine its faint light over me, and it was enough for me to see. But to this day, I wish I hadn't seen what I did. I wish I would have gotten lost, given up and returned home, but I didn't. The pond was nearly dried out, reduced to a sheen of dirty water covering the swampy mud beneath. An arm poked out of the muck, pointing up at the sky, and I saw that it was green and waterlogged. I fell backward in fear, crawling away on my elbows and screaming. Someone must have heard me because cops arrived a few minutes later, entering the forest in search of me. "Hey!" they yelled into the night. "Is anyone there? Are you in trouble?" "Help!" I answered. I kept shouting to guide them, seeing the beams of their flashlights approaching me. When they found me cowering at the base of a tree, all I could do was to point at the arm sticking out of the mud. "Oh my God," one of them whispered, when they shined their lights on it. I only caught a glimpse of Johnny's swollen, rotting face, but it was enough to leave me catatonic. Just like his arm, his cheeks puffed up as his skin and flesh absorbed water. His eyes bulged, staring at us with dried-out irises and yellowing scleras. One of the officers, a woman with kind eyes, kneeled in front of me and blocked my view. "It's fine. It'll be fine," she said. But I wasn't sure if it was for me or for herself. The next few days passed in a blur, and I remember very little of them. The cops escorted me back home, and then they brought in the forensics team to examine Johnny's death. They concluded it was an accident, that he, for whatever reason, walked into the forest and ended up falling into the pond that swelled with the river. The mud acted sort of like a quicksand, drawing him in and under the water until he drowned. Johnny's family was devastated. Everyone expected him to be dead at that point, but they held out hope that he might return alive. Seeing his condition, his family chose to have a closed casket funeral. One I couldn't bring myself to attend, even though Johnny was close to me and my friends. Brian took his older brother's death the hardest. He became a shut-in, skipping school more and more often and barely being mentally present when he came. We couldn't get a single word out of him most days. He stopped joining us in our outings when those resumed after a while. He fell off the social map, cut in contact with everyone and everything. At any rate, time kept passing and the mental wounds began healing, albeit slowly. Me and my friends started going out and playing again, and although it wasn't the same without Brian and Johnny, it was fun, regardless. We found the new playground on the opposite side of town, choosing to no longer use the field that had so many memories of the past. More friends came. Some old ones left with time. Normal group dynamics. It was a year until I saw the girl again. Johnny's death anniversary came up, and I decided to visit the field where we used to play in. I went by myself, on the same crappy old bike. I spent the evenings just mulling around as I remembered fond memories. Rain clouds invaded the town skies earlier in the day, blocking out the sun and threatening us with cold downpours, but I wasn't dissuaded. The clouds finally broke at sundown, sending small droplets plummeting to the ground at first, but slowly growing in intensity. I didn't see where the girl came from, but she found me on the same old pile of cinder blocks, reclaimed by vegetation. "Hey, it's you again," she said, making me jump to my feet with her sudden interjection. I was scared of her, thinking that she was indeed Johnny's murderer and that she was here for me now. "Are you okay?" she asked with a smile, stopping a small distance away. "You look like you've seen a ghost or something." She chuckled, which set me somewhat at ease. I was still ready to bolt at any moment, but my tense muscles relaxed for the time being. She approached the cinder blocks and sat down, gesturing for me to do the same. "I'm fine," I answered her question. "You just gave me a good scare, ma'am." "Oh, come on, kid," she said, her smile widening. "Stop calling me that. I'm not that old." "Then what should I call you?" I asked, hesitantly sitting down next to her. My question seemed to take her aback for a moment, and she needed to think about it for a heartbeat before she answered. "You can call me Nerida," she said. "It's my name, after all. And what should I call you?" "My name's Jameson," I answered, "but all my friends call me James." "Nice to meet you, James. Say, did your friend come back?" Her question blew me away, leaving me speechless for a moment. I didn't know what to say, but I eventually told her about it. All of it. The nitty-gritty of how I found Johnny's corpse and the ripples that his death caused in our community, only leaving out the dream that I had that led me to finding him. Just like a year ago, she was very patient and compassionate towards my struggle. My worries melted away when faced with her warm presence and demeanor, and I was sure that she couldn't hurt a fly, let alone another human. Anyway, we parted ways when it started growing dark and the rain picked up. Life kept going forward. and I soon forgot about her again. With the passage of years and the troubles that adolescence brought, the painful memories also faded. I went to high school, finished it with decent grades, and decided to go to college to make something of my life. That meant moving away from home for the first time into a big city and a cheap, cramped apartment. I'll keep this part brief because I don't want to bore you with the details of my college life. I found part-time work at a local McDonald's. I got neck deep into student loans, and I still needed help from my parents every month to make ends meet. My father got a new job to help me out, which meant moving into a different city and leaving our town behind as well. He didn't sell our family home, though, and I'd soon be thankful for that. The COVID pandemic and the lockdowns it brought came at me in full swing during my second year. My college closed down and the classes moved online, but I decided I didn't want to do it that way. So I put college on pause, quit my job, and returned home to avoid paying any unnecessary rent. My parents were okay with it, but they stayed in the city. Their new jobs weren't affected, so they had no need to return. My dad wanted to keep sending me money and have me stay at home and maintain the household and whatnot, but I refused. And I went job hunting in the area. I quickly found work as a night shift cashier at a local gas station just off the highway, spending my nights there and my days either playing video games or repairing stuff around the house. Most of 2020 was spent that way, in more or less complete isolation. Summer came and passed, with no signs of the pandemic slowing down and colleges opening back up, so I decided to wait another year. As autumn came, I received some terrible news, though, through the grapevine of gossip. As I've said before, I fell out of contact with Brian after Johnny's death. He went through his rebellious phase during his teenage years, starting to abuse soft drugs like alcohol, cigarettes, weed. In time, he moved to harder stuff, stealing and selling things from his home to fuel his mounting addictions. In the early fall of 2020, as his parents couldn't take it anymore, they were going to kick him out, he overdosed on something. No one knew if he'd done it on purpose or on accident. But it didn't matter. His parents were decimated regardless. They just lost their second child. I wasn't invited to the funeral, partly because of the COVID restrictions, but partly because people knew that me and Brian hadn't been friends in a long while. But even so, a few days after he was buried, I visited his grave. I paid my respects. Brian had been buried next to his brother, and Johnny could finally look after him again. I said a short prayer, the flowers on their graves, and I went to that field that we used to play in what felt like a lifetime ago. The place was overgrown with tall grass and wild weeds. Far cry from the mowed lawns that we had maintained to facilitate our games. I got out of my car, noticing a small memorial way off in the sea of grass, right on the border of the forest. I didn't need to get closer to figure out what it was, but I did, regardless. It was a stone cross mounted on a cement pedestal, with burnt-out candles, flowers, and a picture of Johnny at its base. Brian probably made it and brought it here, because it looked homemade rather than commissioned. I think I stared at that picture of Johnny for half an hour at the very least, because I clearly remembered that day when it was taken. We pooled our allowance together, worked odd jobs around town all summer long, and got enough money to visit a nearby amusement park and ride all the rides multiple times. Johnny took us there and accompanied us, since he was the only one among us who was old enough to drive. Someone was there with an old-timey camera taking pictures of folks for a small fee, so we got a group one. Brian had edited the rest of us out, leaving only his brother, his older brother, who was smiling from ear to ear. Wrapped up in these memories, I failed to notice that it started to rain. Smiled from ear to ear. Wrapped up in these memories, I failed to notice that it started to rain. The small drops fell out of the sky here and there, hitting my exposed skin and sending chills rippling through my body. so I turned to walk back to the car and return home. Nerida was by the car, propped against the passenger side door and waiting for me. She smiled when I noticed her, and waved a hand through the air to make me hurry up. By that time, I hadn't seen her in the better part of a decade. She didn't look like she'd aged a single day. Even her clothes were the exact same. "James," she said when I got closer. "I haven't seen you in so long. My, how you grown." "Hey, Nerida," I greeted. "What's up?" "Oh, just the usual," she said, as if I was supposed to know what her usual was. "How about you?" "Same," I answered. "I went off to college, but the pandemic forced me to come back home." We talked for a long while, though I did most of the talking and she did most of the listening. But the rain started to get on my nerves, so I invited her over for a coffee at my place instead, where we could talk in peace while we warmed up. "No," she flat out refused. "I can't come." "Oh yeah, pandemic and all that," I said, rubbing the back of my head in embarrassment. I still had not gotten used to it. No, Nerida said reassuringly. "I'd love to come over, but I literally can't." This was the last straw, breaking the metaphorical back of the camel. My curiosity about her reached unprecedented levels, and I couldn't hold back my questions anymore. "Why so?" I asked. "And I have more questions, if you don't mind." Nerida sighed deeply, but my outburst didn't seem to surprise her. She seemed to have expected it, actually. "I don't mind. Go ahead and ask." "How come I only see you when it's raining? Why are you always dripping wet, even when the rain is mild? How come—" She raised a hand to stop me. So I did, fearing that I'd offended her. But that didn't seem to be the case. We spent a few moments in silence while she searched for her words, but she did answer me. "You're kind," she said hesitantly. "Humans. You have many names for us. Naiads, water nymphs, elemental spirits. All sort of true, but not quite accurate. I'm not like you. I'm not a human." As if to prove her claims, she raised a hand in front of her face. Water dripped down her arm from the tips of her fingers, faster and faster until it formed an impossible torrent. Too much water to come from a few droplets of rain, the ones that hit us now and again. "I'm bound to the rain," she continued after a long pause. "To it, and to the bodies of water it creates. When those vanish, I have to retreat into the underground aquifer to survive. I'll dry up in the sun in no time." I didn't know what to think, what to say. I did believe her, but how do you answer to a confession like that? That's neat, I said eventually. "It's a sad and boring existence," she said. "I'm always alone. This is the closest I can get to your town. You're such interesting beings. I love to learn more about you all, but unfortunately, I can't." We spent a bit more time talking, and this time she let the floodgates open. She told me about her millennia-old life, of her time skipping between rivers and lakes in Europe when she was born, and of how she made it to the Americas with the first colonists. "I can't actually enter salt water, only fresh water," she explained. "But just as your kind has its brave explorers and settlers, so do ours. We made deals with sailors to bring us over in barrels of fresh water, offering their colonies consistent rain for their crops when we'd arrive." Nerida said that her and other naiads came over to the Americas with their first settlers, living in their wells or in rivers close to their budding towns. Just like they'd promised back in Europe, the naiads provided the settlers with regular rain, and in exchange, they were revered as deities. But that didn't last long. After the first few generations of humans, only the elders were left who knew about the naiads and their deal with them. As younger generations returned to Christianity and other religions, the naiads were all but forgotten. Soon after the last humans who had known about us died, we abandoned their settlements, Nerida said. Some of us still stayed behind, kept their part of the deal, but they perished long ago. And now you're stranded here? All alone? I asked, which caused Nerida to wince. Basically. Most other naiads either died or returned to Europe. Very few of us left. I haven't met any of my kind in almost a century. How about this? I offered, trying to lift her spirits. Whenever it rains, I'll come visit you here if I can. Nerida's move flipped almost instantly, and she gave me a wide, grateful smile that melted my heart. I left that evening, but true to my word, the next day it rained, I returned. This time, I was better prepared with a raincoat, boots, thick clothes to shield me from the cold, and most importantly, a movie that I downloaded to my phone for us to watch. If Nerida couldn't come closer to us and experience human culture, I could bring it closer to her. I found her on the pile of cinder blocks waiting for me to arrive. I pulled out my phone, which I kept in a Ziploc bag to protect it from water damage, and after I explained what it was to Nerida, got the movie playing. We watched many more of those in the meantime, so I can't remember them all, but I know the first movie we ever watched was The Titanic. Sappy choice for her first movie. I know, but I figured that she'd like it since it had a bit of everything. And well, to say she liked it would be an understatement. She loved it. She was infatuated with it. Her eyes were glued to the phone screen the entire time, and I couldn't get a single word out of her. When the movie was finally done, she turned to me and punched my shoulder lightly. Trying to tell me something with that? She asked with a giggle. Yeah, I said with a grin of my own. And I don't much like horror or sci-fi. I'm a sucker for sappy movies. Sci-fi? She asked with intrigue. What's that? She then proceeded to ask me more questions than I've been asked in my entire life, but I answered them all with the best of my abilities. The entire fall season of 2020 was spent basically like that, with me going out to the field whenever it rained so I could spend time with her. I showed her music, art, books, comics, anime, manga, anything and everything we had to offer for entertainment. She lapped it all up. She did much better with written stuff than visual media. She rifled through a digital copy of 2001: A Space Odyssey in minutes, explaining that her mind could run at much higher speeds than ours if she chose. During this time, my crush on her only grew stronger and stronger. Even though I didn't think much about her before, when I was a teen and all that, the feelings instilled into me when I first saw her, they never really went away. And now they returned in full swing, deepening with every moment we spent together. She was just amazing. Overall, I couldn't get enough of her. Needless to say, as fall turned to winter and the rains gave way to snow, I was devastated. I was hoping that since snow was technically frozen water, she could still come out, but she didn't. And the winter of 2020 was the loneliest, most boring one of my life. Each day was torture. I merely went through the motions of going to work, showering, eating, and generally staying alive. The only thing that powered me was the prospect of spring, of the snow melting and the rains returning, bringing Nerida back to me. The months rolled by me slowly, but soon enough, 2020 came to pass. January of this year also came and went, and to my delight, the snow started melting recently. In fact, just a week ago, we got the first rain of the year. It was cold as balls, and I knew it could turn to snow or sleet at any moment's notice, so I didn't lose any time. I got dressed, I left the house in a hurry, jumping into my car and speeding off towards the field. My hope was that I could somehow convince Nerida to come live with me, at least until it got warmer outside. I didn't know exactly how we could accomplish that, but she said that she rode across the Atlantic in a barrel of fresh water, so it was definitely doable. I reached the field before I reached a solution for my dilemma. But I hoped that she could help me out, and our two heads combined would be better than one. My heart took a heavy blow when I didn't find her there, waiting like she usually did. Was it still too early for her to come out? I mean, when would I see her again? Would I ever? She said that her kind could still die, so what if she died in the meantime? My mind ran wild with questions, and when I couldn't take the burden of not knowing the answer any longer, I started shouting, "Nerida! Who are you?" I left the sidewalk as I yelled, stepping out into the muddy grass and approaching the field. "Hey, are you okay? Please!" It was nearing evening, but it wasn't dark out yet. The sky was tinted in the signature red glow of sunset, now blocked by heavy gray clouds. My screaming attracted the attention of the neighbors. I realized as much when I saw porch lights come on. I didn't care. I kept at it, turning in the fields like a madman, screaming at the top of my lungs. I saw an old man leave his house and either offer to help me or tell me to zip it, but he got to do neither because I caught sign of something in the woods. Nerida's shape was in there, masked by the dark shadows of the trees, watching me. She reclined against a trunk, seeming weaker and frailer than I remember. Her eyes shined faintly, but barely above a wisp of light. Something wasn't right with her, and that made me worry more. She lifted an arm and gestured for me to go to her. Figuring that she didn't want to be seen by others, I obliged and took off running through the mud. Now I know what I did was stupid, and that every decision I made afterward was a bad one. I know it, and I regret it. I regret not stopping to think it through, but you know what they say, hindsight is 20/20. In the heat of the moment, worried for my friend and crush, I didn't think straight. I ran into the forest after her, but Nerida ran away from me. I yelled for her to stop, that it was me, and that I would help her if she wasn't well, but she didn't listen. The winds and the rain picked up, and deeper into the forest I followed her until I couldn't feel my hands and feet from the intense cold. But I trudged on, even when my visibility dropped to my immediate surroundings, and I had to slow down to a crawl. I kept walking, screaming out her name. I lost sight of her in the sudden storm, but I hoped that she would come back to me, and she did. She came at me from behind, fast and vicious, picking me up and pinning me against a tree. The fast movements and the sudden impact almost left me breathless, and I struggled to look at her through the water that dripped down my face. She looked sick, malnourished, weaker than I'd ever seen her before. Her skin was cold as ice. She was never warm to the touch. Her body had always matched the ambient temperature, and that held true in the moment as well. She snuggled up against me, trying to get her body as close to mine as possible, in what I assumed was an attempt to warm up. Tears started rolling down her face, clearly visible, even through the downpour of water that covered her body. She buried her face in my chest, hugging me so tight that I had trouble breathing as she sobbed. "I missed you," she said, her voice crisp and audible despite the storm raging all around us. "This winter was so cold. The coldest one in my life." Dick move on my part, I know, but I decided that this was the perfect moment for me to profess my feelings for her. I freed one of my arms, I cupped her chin, and brought her eyes up to meet mine. "Nerida, I started, but she cut me off. "I know," she admitted. "I always did, and I'm sorry," she said, her sobbing growing louder. For a moment, I feared that she didn't reciprocate my feelings, that my confession would drive her away, and that I'd never see her again. "For the first time in centuries, I'm so sorry. I tried to abstain. I tried to take as little as I can to survive, but I can't help myself anymore." I didn't get to ask her what any of that meant. Before I knew it, she shot up on her toes and pressed her cold lips against mine. My mind ran rampant with a whirlwind of emotions that put the outside winds to shame. This was all I'd ever wanted, and then some. I hugged her tighter, lifting her off her feet in the process, and the heat of passion overtook me. I ended up tripping in the mud, falling on my back, and bringing her down with me, but she didn't seem to mind. Our lips never parted, and her pursuit for me was wild. I only figured out that something was wrong when I realized that I needed air. That I hadn't taken a breath in a hot minute, and I'd soon suffocate. Nerida's skin turned into a raging torrent that blocked my nose, and she kept my mouth too preoccupied with hers to allow air in. I placed a hand on her chest to gently push her away and take a desperate inhale, but my palm sank. Her flesh gave way around my fingers, turning into water and allowing them to pass through her being. My nerves fired instantly. sending bolts of pain rippling through my body. It felt as if I plunged my hand into a vat of acid, as if my flesh was breaking down fast, leaving only bones and agony behind. I tried to scream, but I couldn't. I snuck a foot between us and tried to push her away with it, but it met the same fate as my hand. It sunk into her up to the knee, and I felt it erupt with just as much pain. I was scared. Either my struggle would completely dissolve me, or Nerida would suffocate me. When even her tongue turned to water, filling my mouth and throat as it flowed endlessly out of her, my fear turned to sheer terror. She would drown me. As I felt my tongue being seared with pain as well, all fight left me and I resigned myself to my fate. There was no escape for me. I was a goner, and my only hope was that there would be anything left of me for the authorities to find. A moment after that, oxygen deprivation finally caught up to me, and I fell unconscious, with Nerida still straddling me. I woke up a few days later in the hospital, missing an arm up to the elbow, a leg up to the knee, and my tongue in its entirety. A cop visited me soon after to take my statement and shed light on my unexpected survival. As it turns out, the old man that left his home as I yelled like a crazy person called the cops when he saw me run off into the woods. This being a small town with not much of anything going on, a patrol car was able to answer right away. They found me passed out in the woods a few minutes later, with parts of my body waterlogged, as if they'd been submerged for days or even weeks. Flesh was completely ruined, the cop told me. But for Christ's sake, son, your arm fell off when I picked you up. The doctors had one hell of a job ahead of them when I brought you in. And that was true. The doctors and nurses were in for the case of their lives, as were the local police. They amputated whatever couldn't be saved, and worked around the clock to keep me from dying of infection and dehydration and whatnot. But they pulled it off. Seeing as I couldn't speak without my tongue, and I lost my dominant hand, the police was kind enough to go to my house and fetch a laptop for me. I know the guy. His name's Gus. He's a great dude, so I trusted him with the keys to the front door, and he did me this favor. With my laptop at hand and a notepad open, I started answering the questions one by one, but I wasn't truthful with him, of course. I knew I'd come off completely crazy if I told him anything. Instead, I said that I probably had a mental breakdown from being isolated for so long. I went off the deep end. Told him I didn't remember what happened to me, how I sustained so much water damage in a matter of minutes, because I passed out soon after I entered the forest. That was pretty strange indeed, Gus said when I was done. I'll send this info up the chain. Maybe someone knows an explanation or something. Soon after that, he bid me a fast and easy recovery and left. I appreciated his intention, but I wasn't a fool. There'd be no way for me to recover and get well. My life was destroyed. I'd never be the same. That was yesterday. I got the password to the hospital's Wi-Fi this morning. I researched a bit more about naiads. Found out a lot of lore and plenty of accounts about them, but they are all pretty much contradicting each other, so I don't know what to think anymore. The only thing I'm sure of is that Nerida wanted to consume me to sustain herself, that she was the one who killed Johnny all those years ago for the same reason. She got scared away when the cops arrived. That old man is likely the only reason why she spared me. That brings me to the present, why I decided to write this out while I still can. As evening came and gray clouds rolled into the skies above from the horizon, they brought more rain. My bed is right by the window, and I could see Nerida out there pacing about, waiting to finish what she started. She smiled up at me when she noticed me staring through the window. She gestured for me to come outside. I can't tell you how much I've been fighting the urge to oblige, or for how long I'll manage to retain my self-control and my sanity. So I'm writing and posting this as a warning to everyone. Fear the naiads. Avoid them at all costs. Stay inside when it rains. Don't make the same mistake as Johnny and me. Thinking outside the box. You've all been asked to do this at one point or another. In most cases, the request was made by a teacher. Perhaps a hip, cool, how do you do, fellow kids kind of teacher who wants you to think creatively. But only if your creative thinking aligns with whatever slightly unorthodox method he's trying to teach. But of course, you just want the lesson to end, so you make half-hearted guesses. And when he shoots those down, you stare at him, blank-faced, unchanged, and uninterested, until he reverts to the original, proper lesson plan, forsaking his attempt to teach you a concept or method that wasn't any better than the original way, just different from it. Outside-of-the-box thinking generally isn't any better than in-the-box thinking, at least for me. I've stood outside the box. I've scaled its surface, measured its dimensions, and I gotta say, the exterior isn't all that great. Its surfaces aren't especially conductive or higher thought. More abstract thought, maybe, but who's to say abstraction is inherently superior? I carry this belief in regards to the methodology of thought for 23 years, right up until the incident with the gunman, and, of course, my observation of the man that this tale is ultimately about. A good example of out-of-the-box thinking, not being more than a repacking of stupid thinking, is the incident that landed me in the hospital with 2 gunshot wounds to the thigh and stomach. A couple surgeries and a small fortune in prescriptions later, I'm mostly fine. I sometimes, more often than not, actually walk with a limp, and a soft tap to the gut will make me wince, but otherwise I can climb stairs and pass gas with the best of them. How I received those gunshot wounds is more interesting than how I've since received them, so I'll move on to that. Only a true outside-of-the-box thinker, a true creatively minded imbecile, would think to rob a video store. A dying video store. A video store that still sold copies of RoboCop and Terminator on VHS. A video store that had survived the near-complete extinction of its kind by reducing all its prices by truly embarrassing degrees, by being operated by a single employee, its sole owner, and by the frequent patronage of people like me, people who like physical media, who enjoy buying physical media, and who may or may not have large amounts of free time due to social life devoid of socializing. People who spend their abundant free time watching movies that no one has discussed, with any real conversational substance for about 2 decades. So when I was standing in an aisle before the dusty cases of the insert your pre-2000s creature of choice, browsing for something to watch and obsessively analyzing over the weekend, I was fairly surprised when the entrance bell rang, and a man wielding a fearsome-looking shotgun entered the store. He wore a black leather jacket, jeans that looked as old as the movies I'd been standing by, and a ski mask that might have been stolen from a 90s heist movie prop bin. The gun, however, looked new, as if prior to arriving at the decision to rob a movie store, he somehow lifted a Remington from a gun shop. The store owner, a man in his 50s, who moved and reacted like a man in his 70s, turned to the newly arrived thief and sighed. I felt that. I echoed it in my own way. It was a sigh that said, as if life wasn't already shit enough. I was fonder of the store than pretty much anything else in my life, so I had about as much stake in its existence as the owner who relied upon its meager business for putting food on his table. I don't know what you call it, the shakedown, the stick-up. Let's call it a robbery, even though nothing was actually stolen. The robber, or the gunman, waved the shotgun around, demanding money in a voice that sounded both impatient and bored, agitated by the inconvenience that robbing someone imposed upon his ordinarily straightforward lifestyle, maybe. The owner went through the responsive motions slowly, lethargically, as if half hoping to receive a chest full of buckshot just to be free from renting out movies to the same handful of people day by day. I watched, unheeded by the gunman and forgotten by the store owner, while still cradling movie cases in my arms. I'd never witnessed a moment of serious crime before, so no thoughts of heroism or even self-preservation came to mind. I was merely captivated by the awe of it. I would eventually be terrified, rendered speechless by the horror of an unexplainable, barely comprehended sight. But in that initial moment, I was simply shocked. When the few dollars that had been in the register were placed upon the counter, and both men in this unfortunate situation had physically expressed their dissatisfaction with the transaction, the robber began his rounds, moving through the store looking for anyone who might have had wallets full of money, or anything that added to his pathetic haul from the register. I didn't catch on to this in time, however, being shocked by the admittedly uninteresting first phase of the thievery, so I didn't move, and the robbers soon became aware of my presence and demanded that I empty my pockets. I gave him what I had, and I saw that disappointed grimace up close. If I had been born with a slightly thicker spine, or balls that were a bit heavier, I might have said something along the lines of, "If I had money, why would I be shopping here?" But I kept my mouth shut and obeyed his order. A half-articulated grunt, really, to stay in the aisle while he continued patrolling the others. The sun shone directly into the store, not inhibited by storefront signs or stickers. The movies, as a result, were faded, making them look older than they already were. My shadow was laid upon the floor and shelves, and even it looked bored by the events. While waiting for the robber to stalk through the aisles, I caught a glimpse of the store owner, dispassionately eating a candy bar, as if his body had just autonomously decided to provide itself with some kind of sustenance without bothering to consult his mind. I note this because it was at that exact moment that another person entered the store. The robber that, outside the box intellect, hadn't thought to lock the door in the meantime, through criminal forgetfulness or criminal confidence. The newcomer, a man who looked much too lively to be in a store like this, walked up to the counter, and I actually saw the store owner's mind boot back up. His chewing slowed. His eyes flickered. He even shook away the webs of apathy that had enmeshed his thoughts. They had a brief exchange that I could not hear, but from the nature of the man's body language, erect though relaxed, like a suburban dad walking into a home improvement store, I guessed that the store owner hadn't informed the man of the robbery in progress. The man walked away from the counter, and when his back was turned, the store owner glanced at me and gave me the most wicked, sadistically mischievous grin I'd ever seen. I realized that I had greatly underestimated the store owner's boredom. He was a man who dealt in fiction, in the fantastical, in the morbid, in the purely speculative. Reality was unbearably boring to him. Even then, in the midst of a situation most people dread to ever experience, he was having a boring time. So he must have thought, why not spice things up a bit? Add a wild card. Maybe something interesting will happen. But things certainly did get interesting. And then they became terrifying. And as you already know, agonizing. For me, at least. The man walked out of my sight, and some inner ethical impetus drove me to follow him. Thankfully, the robber was sweeping through the aisles on the opposite side of the store, and the newcomer had gone to an aisle not far from mine. I rounded the corner to find him standing in front of the store's middling fantasy collection, not that there's many good fantasy movies, with his hands in his pockets of his navy blue windbreaker. He seemed pleasantly content with his selection, eyeing them all with a wonder that I mentally noted but didn't consciously think over at the time. Looking back, it made sense for him to have been amused by them. There was no music playing in the store. Might have felt inappropriately upbeat, so I had to whisper extremely low. Still, the man heard me and nodded along in understanding of my words. He smiled, thanked me with a casualness and audibility that almost made me respond by screaming at him, then went back to browsing the fantasy flicks. The robber was eventually mindful of something. He'd noticed my absence from my designated spot. I heard him call out, "Hey!" which I knew to be directed at me, since there wasn't anyone else to hey at besides the owner, who wouldn't have deviated from his NPC-like station at the register. Before I could say anything to excuse my absence, the robber entered the aisle, shotgun poised chest level towards me. My hands went up, and the movies I'd been cradling, that I for some reason hadn't put back, fell to the floor, clattering loudly. In the following silence, I heard the store owner huff his caveman-like announcement that if I survived the ordeal, I'd be paying for those movies. The robber, in stereotypical bad guy fashion, motioned with the gun for me to step aside. I did so, revealing the still browsing patron, hands still comfortably resting in his pockets. The robber looked at me incredulously, and I returned the expression. Neither of us could believe the casualness of the guy, the amusement on his face. Finally, after allowing for as much time as any decent thug would, the robber discharged the shotgun into the shelves. The sound of the blast was interesting. I'd heard thousands of gunshots, real and simulated, conveyed through the speakers of my computer, modulated precisely to the director or editor's tastes, but none of them, not a single one, had accurately, faithfully attested to or recreated the utterly horrible, physically destabilizing effect of hearing one in person, 2 feet away, without any sort of hearing protection or warning. I hadn't actually expected this robber to use the weapon. The idea wasn't something my brain, accustomed to and tantalized by violence, had ever truly considered. We board planes anticipating cramped seats and crying children, not collisions with mountain ranges or destruction by tempestuous weather, even though we're aware of the possibilities. As if a switch had been turned off, a cord cut, my body dropped to the ground. I hadn't been shot yet, but the concussive force of the blast, the shock of the discharge, immediately reset my ultra-domestic mind. The explosion of debris did not bother me, even as shards of plastic and wood sliced past my face and chest. I stirred, I crawled. I clutched and spat, desperately trying to reorient myself and rid my body of the sudden delirium. The violence of the moment segued into screams, not all of which were mine. The voices spoke above me, one very terribly urgent, the other oddly calm, almost placating. The urgent one was familiar, although at the time I couldn't tell why, so I latched onto that one, clumsily climbed up shelves as if drugged, lurched towards the voice which I had dimly recognized and which had sounded on the verge of an insane panic. My efforts were rewarded with a sensation of flight. Well, maybe not flight in the sense of soaring, but in the sense of being bodily carried from one point in space to another. Through means unnatural to me, my flight was short-lived, and I soon found myself staring at the ceiling, with a bizarre sensation of fingers or points of some kind pressing at least 2 spots of my body, almost like acupuncture. The sensation intensified, focused on those 2 points until they became epicenters of 2 great sites of impact. Then, what had been combined sensations of warmth and pressure suddenly became locations of mind-unraveling agony, and I at least realized that I had been shot. My ears still rang, and my vision was still frustratingly blurred, so the second blast hadn't altered my perceptions much more. The force of it, imperceptible at the time of impact, reared itself in the heat and pressure and pain afterwards. In my body's delayed reaction manifested consummately, excruciatingly. If you want to know what it feels like to be on the receiving end of a thankfully non-fatal shotgun blast, I suggest finding an answer to a more worthwhile inquiry. It's not something you can shrug off or grit through or cry out. There aren't any safely achievable parallel sensations. I wasn't even shot at directly. The gunman hadn't meant to shoot me, and I luckily had been far enough away from the actual target to merely be brushed aside by the volley. And yet, it is by far the most unpleasant sensation I'd ever experienced. I was given a crash course in how hilariously unprepared the human body is for events of physical trauma. So, lying here, gazing up at the ceiling as if my insides felt like they were liquefying and my lungs fought against some indomitable nothing to suck in air, I heard more interesting things through the tinnitus-inducing ringing. The voice, which had been on the verge of panicking, was now panicking. The person from whom it issued cried awfully, which I found odd since I had finally connected the voice with the gunman. This voice, this long, sustained cry, was suddenly cut short and replaced by a sound that was a mix of a tree branch being snapped and a great wet heap of something falling upon the dense carpet. As the agony deepened, my disorientation lessened, and I managed to tilt my head up, an effort that felt Herculean, given the pain, and look ahead of me. What I saw somewhat lessened my body spinning pain as my brain was suddenly tasked with interpreting the bizarre visual imagery, temporarily placing the pain on a cognitive back burner. It was a physically taxing process, trying to make sense of the ultra-violent scene when I saw what I knew to be the gunman, but positioned, displayed in a way that I hadn't ever seen a man displayed before. He was separated from himself, torn, with his insides dangling loosely, gruesomely, right down to the floor. The steaming heap of entrails had been the wet sound I'd heard earlier. The breaking of the man's skeletal structure had been the branch-like sound. The two halves of this man's body were connected solely through the slimy tangle of innards. Everything else had been savagely separated. Holding both halves as if posing with two recently caught fish before a camera was the man who'd been fascinated with the fantasy films. His windbreaker had been spattered with blood and his shoes covered in gore. His face still held a look of amusement, which I found even more unsettling than the sundered man his hands held. The shotgun lay beneath the hovering halves, a loose strand of intestines draped over it. The carpet was covered in the shards of the movie cases and the media they contained, where it wasn't covered by the remains of the man. I took all this in, this great, gruesome scene, in a matter of seconds, then began screaming insanely, the only action my mind could think to do in response to the grisliness. Forgetting that I'd been shot, I crawled backwards, intuiting that the gunman's death, the manner of his death, had changed circumstances, and not for my benefit. You see, after arriving at the decision to command my lungs and vocal cords to muster up a scream, my mind hastily conjured another slightly more coherent thought. Supposition, really. And it was this, that the man, who was plainly not human, would now murder me, since I had witnessed an exhibition of this inhuman capability. It was, after all, how many similar, albeit fictional circumstances had played out in movies and shows I often rented from the store. This man's almost obnoxiously ordinary attire was a clear indication that he desired to uphold an appearance of normalcy. Ripping apart a man in a video store is the antithesis of that intention, so to assume that this act would not be reported and that his normalcy publicly discontinued, he would have to rip apart another man. Me. I hadn't thought to plead with him. It wasn't out of the belief that to do so would be futile. I was just stupidly, irreconcilably terrified. The man, seeing me inching away, dropped the two halves of the gunman and walked towards me, the casualness of his stride, the nonchalance of his expression, inspired the blackest, deepest horror within me. I froze. A condemned deer in the excruciating highlights, unable to do anything but breathlessly gawk at the approaching entity. Clearly not a human. He stood over me, blood streaking down his windbreaker, and extended a hand. I recoiled physically and spiritually, expecting it to close around my throat, lift me up, longitudinally bisect me like a piece of paper. But the man did not reach closer than just a few inches from my face, and the fingers remained relaxed, non-threatening. Finally understanding the intended gesture, but still horrified by what might follow it, I tentatively extended my own hand. The two members met, with the higher form around the lower. Gently, courteously, the man lifted me to my feet, mindful of the trauma that had been dealt to my body. He gave me a warm smile, and I don't mean figuratively. Like, there was a physically palpable warmth that emitted from the expression, a warmth whose radiance was oddly restorative. I felt the pain of my wounds lessen. The wounds themselves did not miraculously heal, but I was given the ability, imparted the fortitude, to handle them with something that approached comfort. Without consciously commanding my lips to, I found myself thanking the stranger. He nodded. He turned away, but stopped. I first thought it was to sidestep the mess that he'd made of the other man, but he instead turned back to me and said, "These aren't very accurate," whilst gesturing broadly to the scattered remains of the various fantasy films. Stupidly allowing my curiosity to get the better of me, I asked what he meant. The thought forming in my head that the stranger was truly some fantastical creature in disguise, and therefore an authority on the authenticity of depictions of the fantastic. No amount of creativity, no amount of outside-the-box thinking could have allowed me to imagine what the man showed me. He smiled, unzipped his windbreaker, shook away the grisly debris, and placed it atop a shelf. He then held up his hand with his palm facing me, intimating that I should either stand back or prepare myself for something. I took a step back and tried to steel myself against the sight of something that I couldn't have ever anticipated seeing. He then transformed. Well, not completely, only his torso and head. The legs remained human, probably just because he hadn't wanted to remove his pants. The portions revealed to me were enough to carry his point, though. The head would have been enough. There was something simultaneously divine and yet obscene about the thing that he partially morphed into. The overall morphology, if it had been completed, would have been utterly alien to the human form. The head collapsed in upon itself, and from the heap a new thing blossomed. Though whether or not it served the same cephalic purpose, I can't say. The chest unraveled, the skin of it, that is, and several things burst forth. I'm hesitant to call them organs because that suggests a purpose of physiological function. And these projections, these buds, they might have been naturally grown ornamentation or armor. It is possible to apply human characteristics to these supernaturally inhuman individuals. But these chest growths were varied in color, not even stagnant in their individual coloring. They glowed luminously, iridescently, like bioluminescent bulbs. The shoulders and arms extended, widened, contorted, becoming wing-like appendages, though they all also seemed to serve some sort of sensory purpose, which I judged by the way they gravitated towards me. The stomach bulged inordinately and then became transparent, revealing a dazzling microcosm of spectral life within, some kind of photic pregnancy. The whole structure, but to call it a body would be a pathetically human thing to do. It was both nightmarish and regal, a blessedly appalling sight that simultaneously chilled and spiritually exonerated my soul. It was beatrific bastardization of what had once been, or appeared to be, a human body. When it spoke, I was seized and disheartened by an inestimable, dreadful horror. No terrestrial entity, nothing born of the known elements within the mapped universe could have produced this exocosmic, abysmal sound, and yet, beneath the awfulness of its abyss-deep tones, there was a paradoxically Empyrean timbre, as if within the blackly sonorous voice piped the trumpets of a heavenly choir. Stupidly, not really understanding anything beyond that, I was less than nothing compared to this being. I asked, "Are you an angel?" The doubtedly intoned voice responded, "I am no angel than you are, my friend. At my highest station, I am Intresser, an entity through which you may convey your concerns and prayers. I kneel before the prime beings, as they kneel before the prime beings." With that, the stranger resumed his human appearance in a physical de-evolution and heroic dissipation that was even more unsettling because I knew what it had been, and it seemed almost perverse for the human body to contain something so wondrously, terrifyingly grand. When his human body had fully reconstructed, the man put on his windbreaker and walked away. Mechanically, mind-numbed by the awesome showcase, I followed him. But by the time I exited the aisle, he was gone from the store. The store owner rose from a crouched position behind the register, presumably having cowered at the sound of the first gunshot. He looked at me, funnily, and I remembered that I was covered in blood. I looked down, meaning to wipe away any substantial crumbs of the gunman that clung to my clothing, but instead, I saw the bare front of my chest and stomach and other lower region also exposed. On my shoes, instead of bloodstains, there were ashen smears. I turned and went back to the aisle, and instead of steaming human remains, I saw a scattering of ashes and scorched carpet. It took a moment for the realization of what had occurred to set in, but when it did, it brought back a fresh horror and beneath that, a melancholy born of recognition of my cosmic insignificance. The mere partial transformation into the sub-angelic being's true form had generated an immense heat, which had blasted the ashes, the sundered corpse of the gunman, and burnt away the front of my clothing. The raw, sheer power exuded by the entity was deeply humbling, and I shook uncontrollably as I returned to the store owner. I told him that I was going to the hospital, and to direct the police there if they were not immediately contacted by the hospital staff due to the nature of my wounds. Half naked, skin singed, I walked away from the video store that I would never return to because in only a moment I had my fill of the strange, of the fantastical, and of the horribly, nightmarishly macabre. You know that feeling you get when you see something you shouldn't? The sinking sensation that pushes up your insides into your throat. For some, this feeling comes from walking in on their parents having sex or seeing a drug deal down in a dark alleyway. I wasn't so lucky. This all began about 7 months ago during my second year of college. I had started working as a part-time loader at a tractor supply. It was easy work, easy money, and I figured some muscle-building manual labor wouldn't hurt my chances with the ladies. Things went about as expected until Jack Stoll walked in. He was handsome, probably in his late 30s, with brown hair sprinkled with salt and pepper, and a short, well-trimmed beard. The odd thing was how well he dressed. Most men that came in were ranchers wearing dirty jeans and boots, topped off with nice-sized cowboy hats. Jack wore loafers, pressed chinos, and a solid-colored button-up shirt. He walked up to me. "Excuse me, can you point me to the pig feed?" Yes, sir, right this way." I led him around the towering columns of ranching supplies to the livestock feed. "Pig feed's right here, sir," I said, pointing towards the stack of Purina show chow. "Would you like me to help you out with these?" What the hell. I'm short on time, so the extra hand'll help." He pulled his cart up next to the bags. "How many?" I asked. "I'll start with 4. Come back for more when I need it." With that, we began loading. I hefted the first 25-pound bag up and into the cart, sending a metallic jangle echoing. You bulking up a show pig? No, he said with a grunt as he bent down for another bag. I'm fattening one up for slaughter. His words were sharp. I disregarded his tone at the time because he added, It's so much cheaper to buy one and butcher it yourself, you know? I love myself some bacon. Bacon, my good man, is the key to life, the meat of the gods. He laughed. Oh boy, my wife hates this stuff. He shook his head. Hated this stuff. He paused. Unsure of how to respond, I bent for another bag. It's probably the first time I've laughed since she passed, so thank you for that. He reached his hand out. My name's Jack. Alex, I said, shaking it. I left Jack at the cash register and walked outside. The sun was headed around the edge of the earth, turning the sky yellow-red. While I waited, I wondered wildly about what might have happened to Jack's wife. The rickety cart rattled out along with Jack. My car's over there, he said, giving his unlock button a quick click. A sedan's light flashed, and we walked towards it. The front bumper was caved in on the driver's side. Not enough to inflict an occupant with more than a sore back. That ruled out death by car wreck for his wife. He opened the trunk, and we had the bags loaded in. Thank you, Alex. Yes, sir. Happy to help. I'm not just saying that because I work here. With another chuckle, he slammed the door and walked past me to get in his car. I'll keep an eye out for you the next time I come in. You're good company. Jack came in regularly after that, getting more feed and occasionally throwing in stall bedding pellets. With each visit over those first 6 months, he maintained his initial politeness. But that wasn't enough to keep me from noticing the changes. Most were innocent enough. Half a shirt tail out, untrimmed beard, messy hair. One afternoon I got a good look into his eyes, and I saw 2 bottomless trenches, the shadow of some grotesque beasts that threatened to break free. Curiosity finally got the better of me. As month 7 of our odd friendship rolled around, Jack's sedan pulled into the lot as I was getting off my shift. Instead of greeting him like normal, I ducked behind a pillar to remain unseen as he walked in. I was thinking about asking him outright what was going on, but that was too forward for my tastes, and I didn't want to lose my job. I peered around to catch a glimpse at him before he walked out of sight. His gait was that of an angry zombie as he shuffled into the store. My gut told me that there was something really messed up going on. I had my theories about what it was exactly that had happened. Murder, drug money, sex trafficking all top the list. And what of his wife? This was a bad idea, but I was already walking to my car to get into place for my half-baked scheme. I pulled into my hiding spot and waited. After 10 minutes, he walked out with his customary basket full of feed. His damn eyes. It was as if what they had witnessed was so horrific, they only felt safe tucking into the shadows of the sunken sockets. He shrugged to heave bags into his car. Instead of ditching the basket in the lot like most of the jerks that came in, he walked it back up to the store. He shuffled back to his car, and left. I tailed him like a practiced stalker, weaving through town, heading towards a truth I wasn't sure I wanted to know. But something pushed me on. Jack and I had grown close, sharing tidbits of our lives in the time it took us to get out to his car and load up. He knew about my parents, my girlfriend, my thoughts on politics, and even my dog's name. Not even my coworkers knew Ralphie's name. And he shared plenty of his life with me. He never mentioned his wife again, but he shared other things. His brother's a cop in town, has been for 20 years. His dad lives up north in Maine with his stepmom. His mom passed away 15 years ago after a stroke. We'd become unconventional friends, but friends nonetheless. And I knew that Jack was a good guy. This realization hit me as we passed city limits, and I resolved to see this through for Jack, to help him out if he was in some kind of trouble. Houses got further apart as we got further from the city, until there was nothing but acres of farmland. It was late afternoon when Jack turned down a dirt road. I drove past the turnoff and doubled back after a few seconds. I could make out his dust trail in the distance. I took it slow so I didn't create my own and followed. In the distance, his dust lingered in place and dissipated. He'd finally stopped. I could make out the tip of a barn. I parked my car down a side road next to a wall of corn stalks and a lone tree a half-mile from where he stopped. As I walked towards the main road, I looked back to see how visible my car was. My little Toyota was forest green and blended well enough with its surroundings. Like gossiping snakes, the cornstalks hissed in the wind as I walked down the main dirt road towards the barn. I was a quarter mile from it when the dirt cloud kicked up again. Oh, shit! I drove into the corn as Jack rounded the corner. He sped past, making the stalks dance around me, and as they settled back into their normal movements, I strained my ears for an abrupt stop signaling the discovery of my car. Just the sound of an engine getting further, and whispers from the corn. When Jack sounded far enough away, I stepped back out into the road. The tip of the barn slowly grew before me. It was like the ones that you'd see in the picture books, red paint and all. But the paint was cracked and flaked, and the wood it covered was dilapidated. Planks were missing every few feet, making the barn look like the skeleton of a large, boxy beast. The farmland around the barn mirrored it. What was organized rows of crops morphed into scattered cornstalks, weed, mesquite bushes, untended wasteland. The smell of shit and something else I couldn't quite place slapped me in the face about 20 feet from the barn. I fought the urge to throw up, but I pushed on. If I found a dead body in there, do I call the police? Jack's brother? It was even worse by the door. But my nose ignored it when my ears caught the sound of a pig. It was faint, but unmistakable nasal grunts. Misplaced relief and courage flooded me. It's only a pig, I thought. I'll drop in, have a quick look at it, and leave. Simple as that. I slid the door aside and saddled in, my hand clamping my nose shut. The grunt echoed around the room, but I couldn't make anything out. Slats of light made it through the cracked windows and missing boards. Other than that, the room was dark. My ears placed the pig at the back of the barn, probably with a pen, with bedding, and a trough, based on what Jack was buying of the tractor supply. I moved into the barn's belly, pulling my phone out for extra light. I noticed a wet sound along with the pig's grunts and its heavy breaths. It must have been eating and doing so with vigor. I guess Jack really only feeds it a few times a week. My phone light cast shadows, making the rusty tools and broken benches in the barn creepier than necessary. And was that a moan, along with the sound of slop? No, surely not. I made out the pen. Light pushed through the slats and landed on a pink, hairy, heaving mass, consumed by the meal before it. My breath quickened and my body shook. Had that been a human leg attached to that pig? No. The pig stopped feeding. All was quiet, but the thump of my heart in my ears and the pig's heavy breathing. More? It asked with longing. Through mud and feces it squelched towards me. A man with long, matted hair peeked at me through the sty's slats. My phone's light danced in his dilated eyes. You're not him. More food. All I could get out was, no, what? Seeing I didn't have food with me, he crawled back to his slop. Light, shaking, I willed my legs forward. In the sty, on hands and knees, hunched over a short trough, was a naked, morbidly obese man. His eyes billowed around him in an asymmetrical mass, covered in a mixture of bodily discharge and mud. I could taste his stench. I welcomed the vomit that came, anything to clean my mouth, and before I had time to plan out my next steps, a phone that wasn't mine vibrated and dinged. It was on a warped table near the front door of the barn. The light it cast crept up the wall. Oh no. Jack walked in with his right hand on his smartwatch. He was pinging the phone he left behind. Fear planted me. I prayed he would be like the T-Rex in Jurassic Park. It couldn't see you if you don't move. He gasped when he saw me. Alex? What are you doing here? He sounded more hurt than angry. Shouldn't I be asking you that question? I tried to project as much outrage as I could muster, but with my nose still pinched, I sounded like a kid show character. A sloshing sound came towards us. The man in the sty crawled up to the slats and snorted, More food? Jack turned to the man. No, you piece of shit! Get back to the slop I just gave you! His voice had mutated into an animal snarl. I figured this would have been the best time to make it towards a thin opening I noticed in the barn wall. If I squeeze through, I might make it out. I psyched myself up for a millisecond, then rushed towards it. "Whoa!" Jack called. "You'll hurt yourself if you go that way!" His words only half registered at the time. I got to the opening and wormed my way out, shoulder first. Jack thumped at me from behind. The image of him grabbing my leg, pulling me in, and chaining me next to the man had me clawing with all of my strength. Shirt tearing and skin ripping, I pushed outside. I breathed fresh air, thankful to be out there. Ignoring the pain, I ran towards my car. I caught the faint sound of Jack's yells, and then his engine starting. I glanced over my shoulder at the car, racing down the road. When I pushed into the corn, visibility dropped to nothing. Nothing but wavy green stalks. I sprinted, making a mental note to exercise more often. My calves were clenched fists at that point. It also didn't help that the stalks whipped my face and arms as I barreled through. The leaves cut like paper, leaving stinging slices all over. On a good day, a half mile would take me 5 or 6 minutes, but this wasn't a good day. It might have been my last day if Jack caught me. I strained to hear over the wind, my heavy breaths and the thuds of my feet. But I couldn't hear Jack's car. That didn't mean much with the extra noise, but maybe I would be okay. Maybe Jack cut his losses and made a break. I slowed to a brisk walk when I could see the tree where I had parked my car. Still, no engine hum or tire crunch. And thank God I'm home free. I was thinking of my first steps when I pushed through the edge of the farmland. Jack was sitting on the head of my car, with his right hand cradling his forehead. He looked up when he heard me. "Alex, don't run. Please, you need to let me explain myself. What you saw back there, he's a bad man." I weighed my options. Try to take Jack head on. Maybe a break for my car. Steal his. "I won't stop you if you want to go. This," he gestured to the barn, "is over. I'm done." I ran past, out of his reach to be safe, and got into my car. He pushed off the hood and stepped aside. Quiet consumed me after I slammed the door. The type of quiet that hurts your ears. But why should I have to worry about this? I'll leave it to the professionals. I pulled away when Jack put his hands up and signaled for me to roll my window down. I felt braver in my car, so I complied. I'd run that sick freak over if I had to, and Jack walked up to my window. "I don't expect you to do anything but call the police, but please, hear me out." Tears welled up. He locked his eyes on mine. "Okay." My foot twitched on the brake, ready for action. You're a good man, Alex." He nodded and wore a half smile that quickly faded. "That thing in there, his name's Richie Snyder. 3 years ago, that piece of shit strangled my wife, Stacy, while she was out on a jog." My blood cooled. He didn't kill her that night, though she grew to wish that he had. After it happened, she walked in, hair disheveled, tank top torn, hanging off her shoulder. Her hand pulled her waistband up. She looked dazed, like she had solved some unanswerable equation. "You raped me," she said. "We did everything right. We reported to the police, did the kit, gave a description, and they caught the fucker. That night was the first night since it happened that she could sleep. As hard as it was, she gave her testimony at the trial. We were only there that one day. She said it felt so good to look that pig in the face, knowing he would go away for good. But Richard had information, which was worth more to the county than putting him away. He was involved with a local drug ring, and he was promised that if he snitched, his sentence would be lessened to 3 months of jail time. Fucking community service." Jack's body shook, and tears slid over his wrinkles. Up close, he looked 10 years older than when I had met him a few months ago. I put the car in park and took my foot off the brake. "God, Jack, I'm not finished." Stace was crushed, shoved back into the mental cage he'd just escaped, except this one was reinforced. More fear, more anger, more pain. In her mind, what other choice did she have? The day... His throat hitched. The day after he got out, I found her body. Tears streamed. She sliced her wrists in the bathtub. When I think back to when I walked in, before the confusion, the call to 911, seeing her body rolled out of the house, I remember for a moment thinking she was asleep. Thinking all that red might be from a bath bomb. It had been months since she looked so peaceful. I hated myself for that, but it brought me maybe peace. No, not peace, purpose. I tailed him for weeks after he got out of jail, followed him through his community service. This was before I had any kind of plan. I thought about our last few months together, and the last time she was really herself was right before the sentencing. She looked the pig in the face, and that's when it all clicked. He's a fucking pig. So why not help him live and die like one? My head swirled with questions, but within the swirling was a wisp of understanding. I didn't know what I would do in his shoes, but I surely wouldn't do nothing. So you kidnapped this Richie guy. You threw him in your barn and what? Fed him pig feed? I didn't see any chains or bindings. Why didn't he leave? The barn isn't mine. Friends of friends own the land. Offered the old thing up to me, no questions asked. You'd be surprised how willing people are to avoid you after your wife commits. Jack trailed off and checked out for a second. Anyway, as for how I kept him there, I had him chained in the sty at first. But he still had some fight in him. He's broken now, of course, physically and mentally. When I dumped the feed in front of him, he wouldn't touch it. But he got hungry eventually, with all that nutritious, crunchy chow right there waiting. His weeping and wailing were sweet music as he crunched through that first bag. But I needed a way to get him hooked. Make him long for it. Do you remember me talking about my brother Tom? I nodded. He asked to be told as little as possible. Plausible deniability and all that, but he stole some bricks from the PD evidence room. Got me some cocaine to add to the mix. I still have a few bricks of it hidden in the barn. Once I threw that in, things got easier. Couldn't get enough of the stuff. Water, feed, cocaine was all it took. Perfect slop. Little piggy got fatter. Any moment I expected him to croak from a heart attack, but he wouldn't die. After all that, why not kill him yourself? I refused to kill him outright. But I want him to suffer. And he's done that. But like I said, I'm done. I can't do this anymore. I miss being able to sleep. I miss not being ruled by spite. I miss my wife. I'm done. Done as in... I didn't want to say it, but Jack understood. Yeah, I'm ready to meet Stacy again. What do you tell someone who's been through what he's been through? Done the things he's done. Don't die, you have so much to live for. And if he continued, would he be any less of an animal than Richie? I wanted to tell him not to go through with it, to think of his dad, of his brother, the life that he might have if he put this behind him, but I didn't. I wish you wouldn't, Jack, but I don't think I could change your mind, can I? No, but thank you for not running, to hearing me out. To my surprise, I got out of my car and embraced him. He heaved silent sobs into my shoulder. Then he backed up and he grabbed both my shoulders. Thankful to have met you, Alex. Thankful for our friendship, however short. A bright spot in the darkness. It was night when I turned back onto the highway. My hands shook as I dialed 911. One ring. I needed to tell someone, right? 2 rings. Richie Snyder. He's still in that barn. 3. I can't just leave him in there, can I? 911 operator. Where are you calling from? I hung up. They called back 10 seconds later telling me He had just received an emergency call from my number. No emergency. At least for now. Sorry about that. I was resetting my iPhone. I triggered the emergency call function. Sir, you sound nervous. If you are in danger, stay on the line and we will... No, I'm great. That was enough for the operator, who quickly clicked off. My only company on the drive back to my dorm from that point on was the whir of tire and asphalt. I didn't know until later why I avoided the police. I felt like a squirrel crossing the road about to be pancaked by a car. I mean, in that scenario, the squirrel has two options. First, the one most future squirrel cakes choose. Stopping, thinking, hopping back from where it came. Second, pushing onward to the other side of the street. I wasn't sure which one I'd chose. I towed my torn and tired body up the stairs to my dorm. Thankfully, my roommate was out. I grabbed leftovers from the fridge, slunk into my bed. I put a Netflix show on to quiet my questioning inner voice and ate. I fell asleep with the leftovers on my chest and stepped back into the pigsty. Any food for Piggy? He called. Startled awake, I checked my phone. 1 a.m. I spent the rest of the night corroborating Jack's story through news articles and court police records. Everything fell into place. I even found Richie's mugshot. Even thinner and cleaner. He looked like a pig. I put my phone on the charger after that and played my PlayStation 4 until I had to leave for work at 7:30. Every time I passed the Purina Show Chow in the store, my insides twitched. But I pushed the feeling aside. And I kept working. I was pretty messed up the entire week. Lots of lost sleep. Lots of wondering if I said the right things or made the right choices. A week after, I knew which one of the squirrels I was. When my shift ended at 4, I made some purchases. A Moldex 2400 respirator, PVC-coated gloves and boots, and 4 bags of Purina Show Chow to finish Jack's work. It took us a while, but eventually we figured out how to get near them. The trick we found was to kill the running lights and let the sub basically go dead in the water. The only things we leave running were the absolute bare bones, the things we couldn't turn off for any reason. Once we did that, they'd come closer. The first one that did, it was a fascinating shape. Like a square with little triangles cut out of it in arbitrary places. All right angles with no other form. Came up to the sub, it circled it a few times, and we agreed it was checking us out. Paused in front of the camera at one point. We got some amazing shots of it. At that distance we could see that whatever it was, it had almost no density. It never turned its back on us because the positioning of the cutouts didn't change. No matter what angle we viewed it from, it always looked the same. When we attempted to touch it with one of the arms, it took off. Not terribly fast, but had a good enough clip that we realized it had to have had some kind of propulsion. What that was, we still don't know. They're sensitive to electricity, I think. But they got bolder. The more we were down there with them. And they started to follow us as they realized that we weren't a threat. We started referring to them as pollies, because we didn't know what else to call them. Started playing little games with them. We'd have them follow us to the surface, where we'd move the sub around and have them chase us. We got really fond of them. I mean, even though we didn't know what they were, we didn't have a clue. But they seemed to pose no threat to us or anything else. And they were almost cute. On a mid-afternoon dive, a school of baitfish came through the area while we were interacting with one of the pollies. The school went around us, but a few fish got separated, passed right by us. As we watched, one of the fish broke off from the rest and swam very close, right up to the polly. It seemed like it was lured to it by something. And the second it hit the surface of the poly, something happened. The poly gained density. That's the only way I can describe it. The fish fell into the poly, and in a fraction of a second, it was crushed by some unbelievably great force into nothing. The only thing I've ever seen like it is the footage of the crab being sucked into a millimeter-wide crack of a pipe. 1 second the fish was there, the next it was compressed and was gone. Needless to say, we were both intrigued and alarmed. Looking back on it, I'm sure this was a deliberate display of what the poly was capable of doing. Things began to go downhill from there. So several physicists were called to help us because we all agreed that whatever had taken place was way beyond anything we'd ever seen. No one could explain the footage we'd shot. There was a lot of talk of some kind of weapon. That it was something man-made. I'm sure if we failed to notice it before, if we were allowed to see it, but the polys, they started popping up everywhere. And more frequently. When we dove to the seafloor, we'd find them lying flat on the sand, capturing, crushing whatever got near them. They'd float by us in the water, never coming close, but always staying within sight range. And they began to get bigger. I mean, soon we were seeing polys bigger than the sub, bigger than seals, bigger than some species of whale. The variety and the sizes were endless. Never the same. People on the project started getting scared. The polys never attacked us. But we began to get the sense that we were being surrounded. There were so many, we were losing count of how many we were seeing. They were devouring the bait we were bringing down, opening themselves up, crushing the things inside them in a fraction of a second. We started bringing rocks coated with frozen layers of chum to see what would happen. Polys crushed them with no problem. We tried the same experiment with steel, concrete. Very small piece of a industrial-grade diamond. Everything we threw into them, they crushed. Last night of the project, there was an accident. As the sub was lowered into the water, a member of the crew got too close to one of the lines. They got snagged on the camera feed. We watched them hit the water. Another crew member threw a life ring down, and I moved the sub away as quickly as possible. As I did this, the camera arm moved. The screen was filled with that color. That impossible Stygian blue. The poly, which was twice the size of the sub, rushed up from below me and headed straight for the crew member. We didn't see it coming. I radioed the surface to get him up, to get him out of the water, but in the fraction of a second that it took to do that, the poly touched him. I watched his leg fall into the poly where it swung as if suspended in air, and in a fraction of a second, he was gone. The stump of his leg was wrinkled like the end of a sausage. I didn't even know that he had time to feel it before the poly took him up into the chest. It crushed him, and from the surface, I could hear people screaming. I didn't see his face. But from what I gather, the force was so great that in the instant the poly crushed him. What remained of his lungs was forced up and out of his mouth. The pressure must have been immense. All of his remaining blood and tissue rocketed up into his throat, blasting out the sinus cavities and into the brain. I have to believe he was killed instantly. The rest of him collapsed down into the poly. In a split second, I saw his head. I saw the scalp. Scalp was split open at the top, and then And he was gone. The poly sank back down until I couldn't see it anymore. We haven't been allowed to dive anymore since then. We're heading back to the mainland. We will probably be debriefed. I can't imagine they'll let us keep our footage. And I imagine we'll all be required to keep tight-lipped about this until we know exactly what these things are. At night when I go out on the deck and I look down, I could see them, following us just below the surface. It's amazing how clearly they stand out from the water. I would never have known that there could have been anything darker than the ocean at night. Until we know what they are, until we can figure out how to keep them away and we can confirm that they don't exist anywhere else, I don't know that I'll feel safe. Because from what I can tell, they don't need water to survive. From what we can tell, the only reason they're in the water is because that's what covers most of our planet. And I really, really hope we're wrong, but for now, all I can do is warn everyone and advise that whatever you do, you avoid open water. Please. Please. Avoid open water. Hey there kids, it's me, MrCreepyPasta, and before we get started on tonight's story, I just wanted to tell you about a book from tonight's author. Kyle Harrison, or Color Blindness, has a new book out called A Growing Need to Die and Other Modern Nightmares. It's available now on Amazon, or if you guys are feeling extra spicy, you can check out the link in the description and enter into a contest to be able to win the book for yourself. Just click the link at the very top of the description, or go a little bit deeper if you want to find the link to the book on Amazon. And now, on to tonight's story. We were coming from a rave. Pair of two college girls, drunk and boisterous. Bree had to call an Uber several times, but none ever came. So we sat, and we waited for the bus. "Do they run this late?" I asked. The fog made it seem like we'd be stranded, like the city is endless. "Sure, girl, I've been out way after 3:30 sometimes," she giggled. The streets were empty, save for the two of us, and it's almost uncanny how quiet everything is. As the long stillness stretched out, I fidgeted, a bit of drink working its way through my system, as I saw two bold, bright headlights pierce the mist. "There's our ride," Bree said, making me jolt from the bench as the brakes shrieked to a halt in front of us. Its bold red paint resembled the taint of blood as we boarded the empty vehicle. "Where to, ladies?" the aged driver asked. We gave him our directions and shuffled our feet to the back of the bus, both of us gazing at the nightlights as a few places closed for the night. "Kinda eerie, huh?" I asked my friend, thinking I had never seen the city so dead. She gave me a wry smile and teased, "Our little secret, huh, Jess? Hope you don't end up like her." I resisted the urge to roll my eyes, knowing she was just trying to get me scared. "Legend says she boarded the very bus we're on, and that if you wait long enough, you'll see her." Bree giggled. "Stop it. I was just thinking it was a weird night, that's all. No need to go all goosebumps on me." She shrugged and fiddled with her phone. Personally, I think the rumors have it all wrong. About the ghost, I mean," she commented. I sighed, realizing she wouldn't drop the subject, and crossed my arms uncomfortably before gesturing to her to continue. She smiled and crossed her legs, spilling her theory. "Okay, so you know how she came on the bus, got murdered, and then wound up stuck here in some kind of limbo? Well, I know a guy who said that that isn't true at all. He said that you summon the girl if you perform a specific ritual, and that she will offer you one request in exchange for one request from her," Bree told me. "What does that mean?" I asked. "From what I gathered, it's like a good luck charm. I bet it's some tourist trap, though. Probably some city official trying to make downtown life seem exciting. If it's good luck, we need some of that, especially with semester midterms coming up," I said, rolling my eyes. I think it involves a few random stops on the bus route, and you have to stop and start at probably certain times. Honestly, I'm a bit too drunk to remember, girl, she admitted. I took out my phone and Googled it, figuring the ritual would be fun and exciting and a good way to end our night. I was mostly trying to prove that I wasn't being a pussy to my best friend. Here it is. The Braxton Bus Ritual, I said, pulling it up off of some creepypasta website. So, it looks like you were right. There are several key steps to the ritual. First, you have to leave the girl an offering, something you feel like that she would need. I paused, looking at the items in my purse. Would a ghost need mascara? I heard a crackle of thunder, and we looked out to see that it had started raining. I was briefly distracted by the mesmerizing raindrops as they slid down the side of the windows of the bus, and then had an epiphany. It's raining. She needs an umbrella, I said, telling Bria to give me hers. What? No, I'm not gonna go walking in the rain just because some stupid ghost girl, she muttered. Oh, come on, you're the one who brought it up. Let's do it, I insisted. She sighed and reluctantly gave me her small red umbrella and laid it down carefully in the seat next to us. I wonder how she's supposed to get it, I asked aloud. I stared at the umbrella for a long moment, feeling a little silly, but didn't want to back down from this, especially since Bree now seems ready to get off the bus without it. So what's step 2? My friend asked. I scrolled down the website, frowning as I tried to make sense of the different versions of the story. Seems like we need to get off at the corner of Trent and Pecan? It's only a few blocks away. I realized as I jumped up and pulled on the cord to alert the driver. The bus lurched forward as it came to a stop, and Bree fell into the seat and busted her nose, making it bleed. I couldn't stop laughing at her misfortune as she covered it with her shirt and snapped, "You're such a bitch sometimes, Jess." Sorry, it was pretty funny though, I giggled as we both got up, and I checked my phone again to see what we do next. Once we get off here, we'll have to circle back to Wrighton Street and wait for the bus again, he said. Bree rolled her eyes and paid the toll, both of us stepping off into the damp street as we got drenched by the storm. This is the dumbest idea of fun you've ever come up with, my friend lamented, as we raced up the block to get cover in the next bus stop. Once we were there, Bree and I both shook off the cold and she sighed in frustration, clearly ready to be done with this and get home. How many damn steps are there? She growled, moving about to try and stay warm. I opened up my browser again and read the next step. The person who left the item behind must venture to the next stop alone. I guess that, since it's your umbrella technically, that means we have to split up. You're serious? Can't we just call it a night and go home? She lamented. I was considering it, especially since it was so late. It wasn't that the city had much crime, but it likely wasn't smart for us to separate anyways. Still, in the back of my mind, something about these specific guidelines was starting to nag at me. The forum where they had been posted wasn't just the sharing of the ritual itself, but experiences that people claimed to have had. Why would they go through so much effort to keep the legend alive? It was a bizarre devotion. I mean, especially the amount of detail that some put into it. Well, you need to at least get your umbrella back, I told her. She nodded, checked her wallet, sighing before remarking, I guess you have to split up anyway. I only got bus fare for one of us. All right. I'll meet you at Jamerson Circle, I told her, and tapped my cell as the bus started to pull up. Keep your phone on you in case you need to just call me. Bree rolled her eyes and boarded the bus. The rain-drenched windows blurred her from my view once the doors were shut. Strange as it sounds, I got this feeling in the pit of my gut that this would be the last time I saw my friend. I shook the feeling away and watched as the bus pulled off. Then I realized how weird it felt to be in the middle of downtown completely alone. And I slipped my phone in my pocket and hurriedly moved down the street to the next block. Jameson was only about 15 minutes away, but it felt like an eternity, especially since the entire city seemed so deserted. Then, halfway there, amid the storm clouds, my phone buzzed. Bree. Get scared without me? I teased, trying to lighten the mood of unease that I had been feeling. She didn't reciprocate. For a long moment, she said nothing, and I could sense something was wrong. Bree? You okay? Then she said 3 words that made my hair on my neck stand up. She's here, Jess. I stopped where I was and held the phone close, trying to figure out if my friend was pranking me. What? Who? I hope to God this was just a joke, but her quivering voice told me otherwise. The girl. She's here on the bus. Something's wrong, Jess. I'm scared, she mumbled. Okay, calm down. I'm almost at Jameson. I got 6 more minutes. Just get off the bus and wait for me, I told her. We already passed that stop. I don't think the driver is planning to stop again. I think she's controlling him or something, Bree said. I ran my fingers through my hair, trying to not panic as I came up to the Chinese restaurant and paused to take shelter from the storm. I'm putting you on speaker. I'm going to look up what the ritual says to do, I told her. God damn it, Jess, she's looking right at me, she said. I know she was about to have a panic attack. Okay, it says you need to sit beside her and state your request. Make it clear what you want, and then if she accepts it, the bus will stop, I answered. What the hell? All I want right now is to get off the damn bus, Bree insisted. Listen, all the online forums insist that she isn't a malevolent spirit, so just do it so you can get out of there, I told my friend. Jess, she said. What? What's wrong? She's getting up. I think she's gonna sit by me. Oh, God. Then the line went dead. I tried calling her back, and I couldn't get a signal. My heart raced as I ran to Jameson Circle. The entire world felt like it was spinning as I turned the corner and saw the bus sitting there at the stop, waiting for passengers. Bree, hold on! I shouted as I waved to the driver. The man opened the door, and I rushed up the steps, turning my head and fully expecting to see my friend, either hurt or worse. Instead, to my surprise, the bus was completely empty. Where to? The driver said lazily. Sir, I'm looking for my friend. She just boarded a few minutes ago. I quickly pulled up my phone and showed him a picture. Where did she get off? I asked. He just scratched his neck and mumbled, Doesn't look familiar to me, sorry. Are you sure? Take another look, I said, doing my best not to have a breakdown in front of this man. Look, kid, it's nearly 4 a.m. Just tell me where you need to go. I don't care about the fare. It's soaking out there. I ain't gonna just let you walk, he said with a sigh. I felt defeated, and then mumbled off my home address before walking to the back of the bus and sitting down. I tried to call her again, only to get more of the same dead signal, making my paranoia rise. What could have happened? I didn't have to wonder for long. A few minutes later, the bus slowed down again, and the driver opened the door. It was storming so loud I couldn't see who was boarding at first. Then I saw the familiar gleam of the red umbrella, and I jumped up excitedly. It had to be Bree! The umbrella came down, and I saw my friend's face. But it wasn't the same as I remembered it being. It wasn't the friendly, jovial Bree I knew. This was a cold imitation. Not to mention she was dressed completely different. A red dress as though soaked in blood, with dark jet black high heels that matched her now lifeless eyes. She walked past me and sat down in the back of the bus, folding the umbrella neatly, and then sitting perfectly still, like a statue. I could feel the air getting colder as we drove, and my heart sank as I knew exactly what this was. I closed my eyes and tried to say a few prayers to psych myself up. Then I got up slowly and I started to walk back towards my fake friend. I think her eyes were what gave me the most chills. So cold and soulless. I sat down alongside her and clenched my hands together, trying to find my voice. I know what my request is. She didn't move. I took that as indication I could go on. I want my friend back. Please. We're sorry. Bree's left eye twitched, and I wondered if the spirit was considering whether or not to oblige me. It was a tense moment of silence. Then she got up and tugged for the bus to stop. The driver obliged, and I watched as the hollow shell of my friend left the bus again. I held my breath. I tried to comprehend what had just happened as I read the final comments of the ritual online. Then my phone rang. I didn't recognize the number, but I answered it immediately. Bree? I asked, trying not to get my hopes up. Jess? My heart stopped and leapt out of my chest at the same time. What the fuck just happened? Where are you? I don't know. I'm at a payphone near Maryland Avenue, she answered, still clearly distraught by what had gone on. Immediately, I told the driver to turn around. I'm so glad you're okay, I said, trying not to cry. I was so scared. I don't remember anything. What happened? Did you see her? I couldn't bring myself to tell my friend what had happened, so I just sobbed back yes. I said, I'm glad you're okay. I think I see the bus. Hold on, she said. I was scrolling through my phone, about to post my own experience and the dangers of it, when I saw a recent comment from another user online that made my skin crawl. Be careful what you ask for. Often, you will get exactly what's coming to you. And then, you'll be the ritual. My heart felt like it was going to beat out of my chest. Then I heard the driver slam on his brakes. I flew forward as I heard us hit something in the road and my phone slid from my hands. Holy shit! The driver yelled as I raced off the bus to see what had happened. It was Bree. Her broken body lay on the street, drenched in blood and staining her once blue dress completely red now. The driver rushed over and tried to perform CPR. Paramedics arrived shortly afterward, declaring she was dead on sight. It's been about a month since all this happened, and I still think about the night and what I saw. I've tried to warn others of what this spirit will do to them, but they don't believe. Everyone reports seeing a different girl on the bus, a different reflection of the souls she's harvested. And even though I'm alive and I survived, I know she's taken a part of my own soul, too. There ain't nothing particularly noteworthy about the building sitting in the middle of the park there. Guess it's supposed to be a stage or a miniature amphitheater. It of itself ain't creepy, it's just, I don't know, kind of big porch thing with a roof on it. What's creepy about it is the back. They publicized a disappearance from here once. Made some X-Files knockoff movie about it, you know. The guy who got abducted by aliens in the White Mountains in the 70s. And the movie came along at the end of that fad, so it's not really a surprise. If you haven't heard about it, don't remember it or anything. So, Walton wasn't the only person to go missing. Well, he was the only one to come back, which is why everyone thinks he's full of shit. At the back of the building is this monument to all the people who have disappeared from this town. Everyone does this thing where they go and they hang up outfits, the whole deal, like someone's still wearing them. And they pin them there. Probably 30 or so sets of pants and shirts and stuff stuck to the back of this thing, mostly little kids' clothes. And in case I have to spell it out for you, that's like 30 people who have straight vanished from this place. Started before Walton. No one said anything about aliens until he came back. No one's really said anything about aliens since, I guess. I mean, he says it all the time, but whatever. So we get this call out to do this job, my dad and I. It was one of those days, gray skies, windy, air was heavy like it wanted to rain but couldn't. It looked like a septic sinkhole had started to open up underneath the amphitheater. Ain't no septic tank there, but alright. Big pits were spreading out underneath the right side of the stage, and the whole floor had a thin crack running through it. The foundation had shifted. The town council wanted to prevent any more damage from happening. There was a single hole starting to show up around the back. And we had measuring rods. We were sticking them down into the sludge at the bottom to see how deep they went and how much clay we'd have to use to fill them in. Well, Dad gets to prod in the main hole. I go around the back, the little one, backed by the kind of morbid display of everyone gone. And the hole's right underneath these blue track pants and yellow soccer jersey, probably from a kid no more than 8 years old. His little vans are stapled up to the wall. So I get to stick down there into all of it. It goes real deep. There's no firm resistance. Sitting back trying to figure out how I can get an extra arm's length down when my dad stood howling like the devil himself got him. I come running around the front and he's got his flashlight shining down on the hole. He's damn near got his whole head underneath the lip of the stage. These kind of sinkholes are dangerous, you know. The ground you're standing on can just shift under you and that's it. You just be gone. Muck down there will swallow you up. So my dad's the smartest guy I know, and there's no way he'd be putting himself into a position without a good reason. He looks up at me. He's pale white. He says, "Get over here." He shows his whole shoulder underneath the foundation, trying to get this light under there. He's not afraid. But something's got him real upset, so I give the ground a wide pass around him and go to the other side of the hole. It's dark inside. And what his light shows isn't much more than the gray-brown stuff that I can see on the other side. There's a kid down there. Can you see him? Dad says. As I got older, I realized that my pop didn't know everything, but when he tells me something, my first instinct is to believe it, even if it doesn't make sense. So I do the dangerous thing. I try to get my head under the stage too, but I don't see anything. It smells humid down here, but not like sewage. More like moss growing on a tree. Where? I ask him. Hole's pretty big, despite the fact that the opening is only about 2 or 3 feet wide. It don't look like it connects to the one around the back. I don't know, I just saw him. I sit up and I fish around in my pocket for my phone. We gotta call somebody. Get your light over here, he tells me. So instead of doing the smart thing, getting someone out there to help or an ambulance or something, I just do what he says. Get mine under there too. I don't really see much other than more of a slimy soil. He pulls himself out for a second, comes back with a pole in the other hand. He's got nothing to stabilize himself with now. Bad news. He goes, put it over there, and shows me with his light where he wants mine. He starts waving the pole around and plunges the end of it down into the standing water at the very bottom. Sure enough, a little white hand comes up when he lifts it back up. I got him there, he says. His face is starting to turn red. He tells me to hold my light steady. The little hand is just hanging there, limply by the wrist. He flings his light out behind him and grabs the pole with his other hand. The leverage is too much. He's not strong enough to hold on to it. Go get the other one, he tells me. Maybe the two of us can lift him out. So I go for it. The whole time I'm thinking maybe I ought to call someone, but who knows how much time this little guy has. It's back around the corner where I left my pole. I shit you not. I hear a giggle. There's 2 little kids standing on the other side where I left my things. So I tell them I need their help. I grab my pole, I tell them to run to the county building, cross the street. Kids are pale as fuck, but that doesn't compute right away. Dad's still half gone underneath the building when I get back. He looks like he's scooched sideways, trying to wedge his hip in there, and the ground still comes up against the foundation of the building. Hopefully it doesn't crumble underneath him. I climb in on the other side of the sinkhole again. I get the pole down there, trying to balance it with the flashlight in the other hand. I shine the light on Dad, down his arm and down the pole, and the little wrist is still resting over it. The little hand looks kind of blue. Careful, he says. Doesn't want me to stick the kid or anything. But I gotta at least find out where he is so I can get my pole underneath him. The tricky thing looking for the right kind of firmness in a mass like that. You get stopped up all the time in the muck. But you know the difference between that slowing you down and when it hits something solid like ground. Or a body. I got him, I tell Dad. Well, hurry up. A couple more gentle prods into the solid mass and I feel something. Feedback, maybe. It's hard to keep the light steady and I pull my pole back some and there's a little fist grasping the end of it. The bastard's alive. So I start to feel some of the worry in my dad's voice. We're on a timer, and those kids out back were kind of worthless. See, nobody ever showed up to help us. I don't want to pull too hard because I don't want the little guy to lose his grip, but what if he's really stuck down there? I mean, how long has he been under? Why isn't he grabbing Dad's pole too? My light catches a little bit of his arm as I pull up a bit, but I have to reposition myself. I find the end of Dad's pole, and I find the end of my pole, and some eyes reflect back at us. He's got his head above the water. The dad makes a noise. When I look back at what I'm lighting up, the kid's other hand is gripping Dad's pole. My first thought is, great, kid. Now, hold on while we drag you out. But then I notice his eyes. They're black. Not lights off black. They're black like the insides of a marble, like a black that goes inward. Sort of like when you're staring up at the sky at night. And that black goes somewhere. I don't know if because it was so dark in there, and my flashlight sucks, but we needed to get this guy out, and that's all I could really think about. That's when Dad calls me by name. He says, John. Real calm like. And I thought something was wrong. I only ever heard him say it one other time like that. And I wasn't much older than this kid down here, and there was a bear in the woods with us. He says, flip your light up. in that same tone. There's 2, 3, 4 more sets of those black eyes shining back at us. These kids are pasty, too. And that's when I put 2 and 2 together, and I realized those ones around the back was off. Dad goes, "There's so many of them, how the hell did they get down here?" And I hear him wiggling. Now something's wrong here, and I can feel it in my gut. Dad says, "We got to get him out of there." When I shine my light back on them, there's more. Like a lot more. "Dad," I says, but I still hear him wiggling around over there, and I can hear a bit of dry soil falling into the water below us. When I put my light back on him, he's trying to scoot further in to get the pole all the way down to those kids. He's going to fall in. He knows better than that. I put my light back on the kids one more time, and they've all started to go for his pole. Saw a bunch of rats swimming once. That's what they look like. He can't pull them all out, not by himself. These kids, what are they going to do down there? I grab Dad's trousers back by the belt and hold on. It doesn't feel like the kids are tugging on him. It feels like he's trying to crawl the rest of the way in. Maybe he thinks that he can get in and get boots on the ground. Maybe he can lift them up or something, but he can't be thinking straight. There's no way he could be sure that he'd have stable ground down there. He shimmies a bit further in, and the edge of the concrete pinches my hand something fierce. I had to let go, but then his whole butt's inside, and he's only clinging by bending one knee up around the platform. I let go of my pole, but I can't reach him with my free hand, so I start backing my way out. I ask him what he's doing, but all he says is, "We gotta get him out, son." I get all the way out and make to go across the hole and grab him when all those white faces are right there at the edge of the hole. All right up where I just was, right up by his thighs. I can't move. Those eyes are meant to swallow me up. He shifts his legs, he slides himself further into the hole, and then he's just gone. And there's just this empty hole. No little kids, no dad, nothing. I stood there staring for a minute before I run off to the sheriff. When he came back with a big flashlight and I couldn't see nothing, I wasn't getting near the hole again. They didn't see nothing. And the one round back, neither. Hit up every damn avenue available. I just getting the same dead-eyed stare. Deputies looking like they wanted to say something, but then they just put their gear away, told me to go on home. I swear, I heard the paper say Walton. They were hanging up on me. Sheriff told me he'd file a report. Then I had a vision of 30 other reports all together in a nice 3-ring binder. Saw the mayor down at the skillet. He kept telling me he was sorry. See, the thing is, no one seemed surprised when I mentioned the kids. Like, it wasn't a crazy thing at all. Just kept nodding, saying they were sorry. A couple days later, the county maybe just guessed on the amount of clay they'd need to fill in the holes. They put more sod down on top. And that was that. It was like it never happened. And I could have grabbed his ankles, pulled him out. I could have done something. But I didn't. Mom and me went back the next week. Hung him a pair of his Wranglers. And a t-shirt. Around back of the building. I could smell the stench of death before I even stepped out of my truck. In its glory days, this place was the jewel of the neighborhood. The American dream personified. A sprawling 2-story, 3-bedroom house only a few miles from the beach. Looking at it now, I'd hardly have guessed that anyone lived there at all. It was an eyesore. Even from the driveway, clusters of discarded papers and trash of all variety, as far as you could see. None of the items seemed to have any rhyme or reason, but that was to be expected given who the owner was. Working for the city for the past 10 years, the name Miguel Tindalos has come up at least a few times a year. He was a foreigner, had inherited a large sum of money from family, and bought out most of the property in the surrounding neighborhood. At first, most thought it was a sign of new blood in the area, but it was quickly becoming apparent that Miguel was going to be more of a problem than a solution. He was a hoarder, plain and simple. Everything he bought, he kept. And while he spent a lot of money, Most of the items he owned were now sitting in his front yard collecting dust. And I knew the inside was no better. And most of the surrounding community complained constantly about the animals, the smell, and the sheer amount of trash. But Miguel had deep pockets, so he could pay any fine that was thrown his way. Some threatened to get the city to condemn his house, but that fell through too. And as a result, the hoarder's house had become a fixture at the end of the lane for as long as I could remember. As I stepped out to approach the house, I tried to recall the last time I had actually seen Mr. Tyndalos in person. It had been a while. Everyone knew he was a hermit. The clutter kept him hidden from the world. I always wondered what it was he felt like he was hiding from. And I guess now that I was here to assess the mess and find his body, it's time I found out. How long had he been dead in his filth before anyone thought to check on him? I knew he had no family, no friends, save maybe a few debt collectors. His mailbox was stuffed full, possibly with months of suspension notices and other bills. He could have been rotting away for a year, and nobody would be the wiser. It made me dread what was to come. As much as I wanted to delay the inevitable, I knew that getting this over with would be for the best, so I got my hazmat suit on and I headed for the door. The air felt stiff, despite the season. Not a soul was nearby, and most of the other people had moved away to get as far from Miguel as possible. He'd driven down the property values, and if it hadn't been for the recent storm, I doubt anyone would have realized that the house was still here at all. The water washed away so much of his trash down the road, it was imperative that the city clean it, just for the safety and well-being of others in the area. But now, standing here, about to pry the door open to a living cesspool, I realized that I was likely going to walk into something far worse than I had imagined. As soon as the hinge unlocked, more trash of every sort fell out. There were wrappers, bottles, discarded food, and all sorts of miscellaneous stuff. It was difficult to even be sure what was worth salvaging, if anything. And I had hardly even stepped inside. I had to crawl over the first layer of trash to get into the front room, where more garbage and clutter of every sort packed out the entire space. There were boxes dated as though meant for a move, perhaps from when Miguel first moved in that had never been opened, crammed into corners. There were also bags of trash tossed aside to any available space that wasn't already piled high. And besides the usual trash, I saw milk jugs that had either fermented or been filled with urine, a clear indication that water hadn't been used in this house for some time. And that didn't even account for the rat feces and other droppings I could spot everywhere. It was horrifying to behold, the sheer carnage and chaos of how this man had lived. I had to push aside cobwebs and trash to crawl through the kitchen. The roof above me was clearly sagging from the weight of more junk in the rooms above. Every crevice of this place was a pigsty, every alcove taken over by more items. Some were antiques that clearly could have been sold, or canned food that could have gone to charity. The sheer amount of droppings and mold made it obvious that there wouldn't be much here to save. I made it to the kitchen and inspected the food, and in every suit, I could tell that the majority of it had gone bad. Rotting or molding fruit was stuffed into every part of the fridge, and dirty dishes piled high on the counters. Then I heard a rustling noise from somewhere above me, and felt my heart skip a beat. Could it be that somehow Mr. Tyndalos had managed to remain alive? It seemed like an impossibility, but I had to be sure, so I closed the fridge back and made for the stairs. There was even more debris here, along with the larger feces droppings that looked like they'd either came from a large animal or from Miguel himself, and it made me want to vomit as I slowly climbed the stairs and called out his name. I didn't want to hold out hope that he was still alive, but if so, I had to at least try to help him out of this nightmare. As I stood at the top of the stairs, my eyes drifted towards the bathroom. I wasn't sure I was ready to face how nasty that was, but I knew I needed to check it, since it was the closest. Pushing the door open, I was fixated on the pile of human feces that was dredging from the toilet, along with a massive amount of what looked like shredded skin on the floor. It was nauseating, and disturbing to think that any human would subject himself to this. At the back of the door, on a hook, I saw what looked like some kind of costume. Wrinkled, completely yellowed by mold and time itself. In a previous age, it might have even looked like a bodysuit of some kind, I thought, as I pulled back the shower curtain to see more caked mold and feces covering every part of the tub. There was also blood and what looked like a woman's head fused to the shower, where the water would pour out of her eye sockets. I quickly backed out and slammed the door, my own head dizzy as I tried to come to terms with what I had just seen. This was beyond revolting. I had seen a lot of terrible things in my day, but nothing like this. I wanted to leave immediately, call the cops, maybe even throw up. Miguel Tindalos was some kind of serial killer. It all made sense to me as I stumbled down the hall, trying to not trip over the other debris. All the reports of people going missing in the area, they had become part of his horde, and I was now looking at the shredded and flaky skin on the floor and wondering how many victims were actually buried under this filth. And somehow, instead of finding an out, I was in a different room. I was immediately confused. Had this room been here before? The hallways and clutter made this house feel confusing and labyrinthian. As the door pushed open, I saw my utter bewilderment that inside it was pristine, as though a line had been drawn in the sand to distinguish that this area was different than the rest of the house. As my vision recovered, I realized there were candles neatly arranged around a draped piece of furniture at the end of the room. The setup reminded me of how an altar might appear in a shrine, unsettling me even more. I felt compelled to pull back the cloth and see what was underneath. It was a large vanity mirror, the kind of which might normally hang in a master bedroom. Instead of being made of normal clear glass, the material of the mirror was the darkest shade I'd ever seen. I tried to think of the name for it. I think the closest description was Vanta Black. It was uncanny to behold. As long as you might stare into it, nothing would ever reflect back. I reached out instinctively to touch the mirror, mesmerized by its presence. And then I felt a chill in the air. Had the candles been lit when I entered the room? The mirror seemed to move of its own accord, and then I realized it was the glass sliding out of the frame, the way that a sludge might from a broken pipe. It was a living slime that was moving towards me, and from the sludge, I saw what looked like fingers protruding. I fell backwards out of the room and towards the hallway, pushing clutter aside. I think I literally shouted, "What the fuck?" as I began to run. But the horde was all around me. I knew that a creature with no bones would find it far easier to traverse this area than me. I could hardly catch my breath, and then in my shattered brain, I thought of the window in the bathroom. I could climb out. I pushed open the door, climbing atop the feces-covered toilet as my heart pounded faster. The slime was right behind me. It swirled and moved towards the tub, as though attracted by the body parts. I couldn't help but be paralyzed in fear as I pushed the window latch to the roof open and watch the slime consume the costume on the wall. As it took the form of the bodysuit, I realized the entire thing was in fact made of peeled, wrinkled human skin, worn out from age and multiple wear and tear. It was mortifying to watch, but I couldn't look away as it picked up the severed head, pulsing and oozing in and out of the empty sockets and holes as it seemed to take it on as a mask in this misshapen body. And then I heard the ghastly scream. It sounded like he was trying to imitate the woman that it had taken as a body as I pushed onto the roof. I'm not quite sure. I couldn't stop from running as I fell out onto the hard tiling and looked towards the backyard. There looked to be literally hundreds of bags of trash filled with leftover food, discarded items, and possibly even more disgusting stuff, but I didn't care. My life depended on the fact that I needed to keep moving. I leapt into the trash below and swam through the putrid clutter, pushing my way to safety to avoid the ungodly creature that followed. I made it to my truck and I drove away as fast as I could, not even bothering to stop and unzip the hazmat suit. I stopped, I took a few breaths to clear my head. The house needed to be demolished immediately, destroyed before any other souls became a part of that clusterfuck. There's a spare pack of cigarettes in the truck and a gallon of gas. I turn around, I forced myself to return, hands gripping the wheel of my vehicle as I came up to the house. I got out and started to douse the trash with gasoline, determined to end this nightmare before anyone else had to come across it. I could hear the creature scream as I lit a cigarette and tossed it into the pile, shielding my eyes as the inferno began to rise. I felt the heat swarm around my body as I stepped away, my feet feeling heavy as I felt the flames lick my skin. Something sparked from the trash heap, colliding with my eyes, and I screamed, desperate to see again. I ran from the house. I called 911 as the fire kept consuming the horde. Later that day, I had to have emergency surgery. My eye was removed due to retinal scarring. I returned to the hoarder house the next day to be sure the inferno had done its job. But it felt like the trash heap had doubled in size, spread even further. As I looked at the desolate structure, I wondered to myself if part of me was now left behind in this place to become part of the horde. I've recommended to the city that we simply just leave the property alone. And I hope they listen. Put my face on doll face and doll face on me. That was a really weird request, but I didn't think much of it at the time. I replied, sure, when do you need it? After I sent the message, I opened the image attached to the email. It was a thin, blonde woman. She held a plastic Barbie doll in her hand. I opened up Photoshop. It's time for work. Using the selection tool, I carefully replaced her face with the face of the doll. It was a bizarre request, yes. The picture I ended up with was beyond anything I'd ever made, and trust me, I've seen a lot of creepy images in my life. Being a Photoshop expert pays a lot. But when you're just starting out and you have to make money, you have to do what you can to earn that extra buck while you're still learning. Thankfully, the internet makes it easier, and using a couple of freelancing sites and Instagram, I finally had a business. It was fun. And it paid for the occasional dinner once in a while. My whole project was swapping the faces of two people, or a toddler and a person, or the person with his pet. Also, the usual placing of the Taj Mahal on a person's palm or the Eiffel Tower under a person's finger was part of the service I offered as an amateur image editor. Now, I know there was an app out there for this now, but they're not as accurate as I'd like them to be, and people still pay for the human touch. I usually charge about $40 for each picture, and that works out for me. The weirdest pictures I ended up making usually involve swapping faces of pets with the owners. Those usually made me laugh by the time I finished making them. Pasting the doll's face on a woman's picture ended up producing something else. For one, the woman now had eyes which covered more than half of her face. The eyes were perfectly circular, with a blue border around her slightly oval and black iris. In between those giant eyes was a tiny opening, which was supposed to be a nose, and right below the nose were her extremely thin lips. The presence of empty space all over her face made it all the more unsettling. Who knew dolls had such misleading proportions? On the other hand, pasting the woman's face on the doll didn't make it half as creepy as what the woman's version looked. The doll now had an extremely realistic face. When I was done, I looked at what looked like a giant doll holding a very small human. I wanted to laugh, and perhaps I would have, but at that moment I didn't. Something about the picture felt very wrong. But then I got the reply from her. As soon as you can, please. I sent money. Check, please. Instantly, I got another notification. The payment had been processed. $400. Yeah, $400. That's what I'm supposed to make after editing 10 pictures, not just one. A small part of me was filled with happiness and wanted to let this slide, but that would have been wrong. I replied back, attaching the photo. Hey, I've attached the picture after swapping the relevant faces. However, I think there's some confusion regarding the payments. I run an honest business, and it is $40 for each picture, not $400, so I'll be returning the extra money. Do let me know how you like the picture, or if you want any changes in it. Thank you. I hit send, opened my payment wallet, and sent back $360. Once that was done, I felt strangely happy. I did the right thing. $400 could have been very useful to me, but it wouldn't have been the right thing to do. Just then I received a notification. I opened it and saw that she had sent back $360. I thought that whoever this client was, she was very technologically challenged, and anyone else would have taken advantage of it. But not me. I opened the app to send back her payment when a new email popped up. It was from her. Thank you, love it so much. Keep the money, I insist. I will mail you again. I read the email again. Those $400 weren't sent by mistake. She wanted me to have it. She liked my work, too. I stroked my beard and smiled. I knew I wasn't an artist, but it is true what they say. The difference between a starving artist and a successful artist is not their talent, it's how rich their fans are. Judging the woman who wanted her face to look like a Barbie doll, it seemed like I had found my first rich fan. Hey, $400 is $400. I needed it. I wasn't going to upset her by denying her generous gesture. I replied, I'm glad you liked it. Thank you for your support and contribution. It means a lot. I was about to walk away from my computer when I received another email. It was from her again. I opened it. This time it was a different woman holding a different doll up in the same angle. I pay $400 if you put doll face in her face and her face on doll. Those first 3 words were like music to my ears, $400. And for what, really? Sure. Is this your friend? I replied. And I wondered whether I should have asked that, because there was no need to overstep my boundaries. I expected the email from her, but instead I received a notification on my payment wallet. $400. See, I know earning $800 within a few minutes isn't a big deal to many people, but for me, it felt like hitting the lottery. Without a proper day job, I was burning through my savings. So this is a pretty big deal for me. And then I received another notification. Yes, she very good friend. Do you have friend? I knew I had to reply, and the woman just sent me $800 for photoshopped pictures. She deserved the fastest replies. Yeah, I have a couple of friends, although I don't see them much anymore. We're still in touch. I sent the mail and got to work. This woman was holding a similar Barbie doll. She had blonde hair, was slightly healthier than her friend, and wore a yellow top. Well, the fact that the Barbie was also dressed in yellow made me realize that her friend probably planned it. Like her friend, she was posing with the Barbie and standing in front of a window frame. Through the windows, I could see that there was a green field, which probably meant that she lived in a rural area. Carefully, I swapped the faces, putting extra attention to details, to at least try to justify the amount of money I could be paid for them. In the end, the final picture looked as weird as the previous one. A middle-aged blonde woman with large ping-pong ball-sized eyes, a tiny opening for a nose, and small lips underneath the nose, with the rest of the face being empty. I wanted to laugh at the final creation, but the eerie, creepy face of the doll-faced woman stared back at me, which made me sick. I focused my attention on pasting her original face on the empty face of the small doll she was holding. When it was done, I was about to send it when I saw another mail from her. Why you no see your friends anymore? I replied, we grew up together, but most of them flew away to different parts of the States and settled there. But we get to meet occasionally for events like someone's wedding and stuff like that. That's fun. I sent the mail. Then I sent the picture and thought about whether telling her about my lonely social life was absolutely necessary. Received pic. It's good. Thank you. Where you live? Now I know I may come off as someone who is not smart enough in these situations, but despite my overbearing friendliness, I wasn't stupid enough to give her my location. I'm glad you liked the picture. I live in Hawaii. Is there anything else I can do? I waited for a response, but the one I got was the least descriptive email ever. Okay. That was it. The next day, she sent another picture, and I happily edited it, replacing the face of the new woman with the doll she was holding, and sent it back. Another $400, like always. I was slowly starting to wonder why she kept asking me to do this. I mean, I know this question should have come over to me sooner, but it was weird, right? Taking off faces of dolls, putting them on your own face. But the only reason I didn't complain was because of the money. $400 was $400. I wasn't going to deny myself that. Here's a brief overview of the email conversations before I realized how irreversibly trapped I was. Thank you, my friend. Received pic. See you later. Thanks. I was always great hearing from you. Sent new pic. Please change and put doll face on her face on doll. Send money too. See you later. Hi. Thanks. I sent the picture you requested. See you later. See you later. See you later. 972 Durman Street, Newark, New Jersey, 07101. Yeah, besides that final see you later was my address. I stared at the words and I felt my heart pounding in my chest, and I heard of hackers figuring out locations of someone's place by tracking their IP address or whatever, but I didn't expect her to do something like that. I mean, for one, she was gullible enough to hand me $400 every time for a silly Photoshop edit. I thought about what to tell her. I mean, on one hand, I didn't want to lose my most profitable customer. On the other hand, I really didn't want to interact with someone who just typed out and sent me my own address. The screen showed another notification. I clicked on it. Why did you give me a wrong address? See you later. With trembling fingers, I typed out, I used to stay in Hawaii for a while. I don't anymore. Sorry. I sent the email. I thought about asking her how she got my address and why she sent that to me, but I was too terrified at that point to do anything. Part of me wanted to close my computer and call the cops. But I sat there, staring at the blank screen, feeling cold sweat drip down my forehead. I waited for a reply, but when the reply didn't come, I opened up the previous picture to make the necessary changes. This picture was a woman wearing large round glasses holding a Barbie doll. I zoomed in on her face, brought the selection tool near her glasses, but that's when I saw something that raised every hair on the back of my neck. I moved away from my monitor, my heart beating rapidly and hands too cold and numb to move. I stared at the glasses again and at the faint reflection in them. What I was seeing wasn't physically possible, but there was. Right in the glasses, a reflection of three women standing in front of her. One of them, the woman who I was in daily contact with, held her phone, pointed at the woman, and was taking her picture. But in that blurry reflection, I saw the faces of the three women. They didn't have human faces. I mean, in fact, their faces looked almost cartoonish. Just like the pictures I created by swapping faces of dolls with theirs. They had big flat eyes that stretched across half their face, with tiny noses and lips. Faces of dolls on all of them, looking past my soul as I kept zooming in. My fingers trembled as I panned to the right again, dragging the shaky mouse, and there they were, all of them having the same disfigured faces. The ones that no human face should ever have. The notification popped up on my screen. New email. I opened it. Turn around. I don't know about what you think, but no email should have those two words in them. I flipped in my chair and turned around instantly, not giving myself time to process the dread I felt in my body. In front of me, I saw two women, both of them holding two dolls in their hands. I had seen these women. I had seen those dolls. I made them. They looked exactly like I expected them to look, exactly what I saw on the screen earlier. The women had the faces of the dolls. The dolls had the faces of the women, and they were exactly how I'd photoshopped them to look. Large doll eyes, small noses, tiny mouths on giant heads, detailed human faces on tiny doll bodies. If there was a proper time to faint out of pure fear or have a heart attack, it was at that moment. And then Then they opened their mouths. They didn't need to move their mouths to speak, but I understood what they were saying in my mind. The world went dark as they told me what they wanted, who they were, and what I had to do for them, and then they vanished. They vanished. I turned about, I finished the job I was being paid $400 for, and I sent the picture to her. They said that getting a human to trade their faces is the only way they can wear the bodies of the souls that they devour. They said that no woman is safe, and soon all will meet the same fate. What they have in store for men is worse. And if I tell you what else they told me, you'd think I was insane, but it's just too much knowledge about our own frail nature, too much information about how insignificant and powerless we are compared to those who were feasting on our souls. They said that money's not a problem, but someone willing to do this work is rare. They said that I could deny and they would leave me alone and wipe my memories and I wouldn't remember anything, and perhaps I should have taken their deal. But $400 is $400. Hey there kids, it's me, MrCreepyPasta, and before we get started on tonight's story, once again, I wanted to take a quick second to thank you all for being here and watching the channel, as well as being subscribed to the channel. And I just want to remind you all that there is a non-stop horror radio that runs 24/7 that goes also along with these stories that I tell. That live stream will run non-stop until the end of time, hopefully, and is constantly updated with new stories that I tell on the channel. So, if you guys are looking for something to do, or if you haven't seen me upload in a minute, then check out the live stream. I guarantee it's going to be something worth your time, and everybody in the chat's usually pretty cool. Also, before we get started, I wanted to tell you about tonight's sponsor, Raid Shadow Legends. Everyone knows Raid Shadow Legends by now, but did you know it's Raid's 2nd anniversary? That's right, it's been 2 years since Raid burst onto the scene and completely took over mobile gaming. Since then, Raid's only gotten bigger and only gotten better. Personally, I always thought the game was older than that, but apparently it's 2 years. So what's my favorite place to play the game? Honestly, it's at my work desk. It's kind of like a bad thing to say, but I actually keep Raid open on my PC because you can play Raid on PC and on mobile on one of my screens, as I'm usually editing something on the right side. And what made me fall in love with the Raid game? It's the graphical design of it. There's many different mobile games that I've played that are actually somewhat similar, but Raid has a very unique look, and honestly, it's incredibly high quality. So what's new with Raid? This month in Raid's 2nd anniversary, the schedule is absolutely packed with amazing events. They got 6 straight weeks of anniversary events and tournaments running from March 1st all the way through the middle of April. All of them with insane prizes to win. They've even launched their very first clan versus clan tournament to give players a chance to compete directly against each other to see who comes out on top. And if that's not enough, they just released the very first champions in the badass-looking Shadowkin faction. Raid's huge already, and their whole anniversary event makes it even more awesome and a great time to join the Raid community, so don't wait around. So if you want a huge head start in Raid, all you have to do is hit the link in the description or scan my QR code, which I have now, and you get a free epic champion, Jotun, who is amazing for the Doom Tower, by the way. You get 100,000 silver, 50 gems, and 3 ancient shards, so you can summon awesome champions as soon as you get in the game. So all this treasure will be waiting for you here. And the rewards will only be available for the next 30 days, and only for new players. Once you're in, you can find me in the game under the name MrCreepyPasta, and if you're fast, you can join my clan, the MrCreepyPasta boys. And it's that easy, so just click the link in the description, and I'll see you in game! I don't feel so good. Every day, I feel it getting worse and worse. I don't know how much more of this I can take, but the pain just keeps getting worse. I think I'm gonna die. God, I don't want to die. I don't want to die. Please don't let me die. Please. Please. The symptoms started about a week ago. The indigestion had set in while I was working. It was minor at first. I chalked it up to the eggs that I had for breakfast going off. I figured I'd just toss them out later and things would be fine. Not my stomach wasn't ideal, but it wasn't anything I hadn't dealt with before. I stayed at my desk and just kept working. I had a client call to prepare for, and I was a little behind already. I always found it harder to stay organized while working from home. There were more distractions, fewer people around to help remind me that I was in the office, even if I technically wasn't. As the hours ticked by, that unpleasant cramping in my stomach just got worse. This might be a little TMI, but I'd figured that I was probably going to get the runs from whatever I'd eaten, and I'd tried to, well, take care of business beforehand. No luck. Although I wasn't exactly worried about it. Stomach problems are just a fact of life that everybody deals with, but it's not like I was expecting anything bad to happen. I think you can see where this is going, right? When it hit hard. And it hit at the worst possible time. Thank God my mic was muted. I had been at my desk 1 minute and trying to run to the bathroom the next. I just remember a powerful cramp in my stomach. Strong enough that I was almost sure something was stabbing me from the inside. I got up to quietly excuse myself, but I didn't even make it to the door of my office. My legs seemed to collapse under me and I hit the ground hard. My skin felt cold, save for one very conspicuous wet, warm spot and a whole hell of a lot of mounting shame. Even though nobody had witnessed my little accident, I was still embarrassed. But beyond that, I was scared. I'm not exactly an old man. I'm 28. And in case you can't put the pieces together, collapsing like that and losing control of your bodily functions at my age, it's not normal. Okay? The pain in my stomach was so bad that I physically couldn't move. Even the simple act of pathetically curling into a little ball to dry heave hurt more than anything else ever had. I must have laid there for at least half an hour, too in pain to even get up and check on my computer. Work hardly seemed important at the moment. In time, though, the pain did begin to fade. My first priority was to slowly pick myself up. My legs still shaky, I needed to brace myself against the wall as I stumbled into the nearest bathroom with a shower. I didn't think I was going to go into detail on how bad it was, but I ended up lying on the floor waiting for the pain to fully subside. It never really did. Even afterwards, there was still a dull ache in my stomach and my breathing was still heavy. I ended up throwing away the jeans I'd been wearing and changing into some fresh clothes. The nausea was mostly gone. Mostly. I still felt like shit, so to speak. Eventually, when I shambled back to my office, I sent a message to my boss apologizing for my abrupt disappearance from the call and took the rest of the day off. Then after I was done cleaning up the little puddle in my office, I went straight to bed. And I hoped a little bit of rest might do me some good. The next day, I felt a little better. I was still a little sore, but otherwise, more or less, I was back to normal. Now, first things first, I tossed out the eggs from my fridge. Figured those are probably the cause of yesterday's humiliating little episode. And I really wasn't looking for a repeat of that, so instead, I settled on some instant oatmeal for breakfast. I figured it was a safe choice, wouldn't be too hard on my stomach. I only actually ate about half of it before heading into my office and starting the day. The room was cold. I left the little window open just a crack overnight to air out after I'd cleaned it up. I closed it before booting up my computer and donning a sweater to handle the chill. Before trying to pick up where I'd left off the day before, I got in a few hours of uninterrupted work. I was getting pretty close to lunch before the stomach cramps returned. They came on suddenly and sharp, just like they had the day before. A horrible panic filled me, and I almost got up to hurry to the bathroom once I figured out what was probably going to come next. The vivid memory of lying on the floor, soiled and in agony yesterday gave me pause. The pain grew worse, sharp and stabbing. I actually caught myself crying out in pain and starting to double over. I could feel it coming. I didn't want a repeat of yesterday. I didn't. I forced myself to get up and braced myself against the wall for support as I shambled towards the door, hoping like hell I could make it to the bathroom. No such luck. When it came, it dribbled down my legs, staining my jeans and leaving a disgusting pool on my floor. I gave up at that point, and you can't exactly unshit your pants, so what else was I going to do besides just wait for the pain to go away and clean up the mess? My latest accident didn't do anything to relieve my current agony, though. If anything, the pain just seemed worse. I couldn't even manage to make myself move. All I could do was stand there, breathing heavily and whimpering as tears of shame began to stream down my cheeks. I was shaking, trying not to scream out loud, but those stabbing cramps just got worse and worse, and I almost felt like they were going to rip me straight in half. I stayed there, thankfully not on the floor, but still helpless, waiting until they started to fade. The pain just seemed to radiate for a while before finally fading away. Although it felt like it took longer than before, my little accident left a mess running down the wall. I knew I'd have to deal with that later. Once I was able to move again, the only thing I could do was drag myself towards the bathroom and throw myself into the shower, clothes and all. And I just lay there, under the hot water for what must have been a few hours, trembling from the aftershock and the pain. I didn't know what the hell was wrong with me, but it was obvious by now, of course, that something was still very, very wrong. Was I sick? That had to be it, right? Maybe this was some sort of stomach flu. I mean, I'd had a stomach flu that left me in a bad way before. Not quite like this. But it was a close second. Or worse, maybe it was COVID. Was this a symptom of COVID? I mean, I had no idea. I'd rarely left the house since quarantine had started. Whatever it just wasn't fucking normal. When I was able to pull myself together, pick myself up off the shower, and change out of my wet clothes, the first thing I did was call an Uber. Told my boss I'd need the rest of the day off to go to the emergency room before cleaning up the mess I'd left. I left the windows open enough to air out the room, and then I went straight to the ER. I figured whatever was happening to me was bad enough to justify risking visiting a hospital. The cramps came again in the Uber, and along with that, very predictable results. Can you pull over? I asked the driver, my voice straining a little. She didn't seem to notice. Can you please pull over? We're almost there, she said in a reassuring voice. Please, just pull over. The cramps were getting worse, sharp and stabbing. I tried to stop what I knew was coming next. It didn't do me any good. Oh God, I'm so sorry, was all I could whimper. I didn't think she realized exactly what I meant by that at first. She figured it out soon enough. Jesus Christ, what the hell? I'm sorry. What the fuck is wrong with you? I'm sorry. Get out. Just get the fuck out. She barked immediately. I can't move. Get out. I can't move. Get the fuck out. Get out. I fumbled to grab the door and push it open, then collapsed out onto the street. I never felt so humiliated in my life. I managed to stumble over to the sidewalk as I heard the car door slam behind me, and I heard the Uber driver speed off. The hospital was still another 2 blocks away. Given my current state, walking wasn't an option. I had a feeling that calling another Uber also wasn't anything I could do. The stabbing pain made standing up a Herculean feat, and I stumbled over to the nearest building and collapsed. The pain grew stronger, and I doubled over, curling into the fetal position as more liquid dribbled out of me. It was around that point that I noticed the smears of blood I was leaving behind. Maybe it showed better against the sidewalk. Maybe it was something new. Either way, a person shouldn't have that much blood coming out of them, especially not like this. It was dark and red and watery. Maybe it looked worse than it was. I can't say for sure. The pain felt worse than before, growing in intensity to the point where I was wondering if maybe I actually was just going to die on the sidewalk. Jesus, sir, are you all right? I heard someone ask. A stranger stood over me, a middle-aged man. He kept his distance. I would have too if I were him. Help me. My voice was small and hoarse. Please help me. He went for his phone in his pocket. Figured he was dialing 911. My head rested against the pavement. My breathing felt funny. My insides felt like they were sloshing around, as if my entrails had turned to snakes and were fighting to escape. It hurt. It hurt so much. I don't remember anything else. When I woke up, I was in a hospital bed. I could hear the beeping of machines beside me. The pain was still there. It wasn't as bad as before, more of a dull throb, but it was still there. I still had my clothes on, but I couldn't feel my wallet and my phone in my pocket. Had they fallen out while I was on the street? The lights were dim, although I knew there was a bright light beside me on the left. I looked over to see another hospital bed with a young woman in it. She might have been a teenager. It was hard to say for sure. She looked deathly pale, was covered in sweat. She was curled into the fetal position and reading something on her phone. Her breathing was heavy. The room stank like fecal matter and decay, with a coppery undertone that I later realized was blood. "Are you sick too?" I heard a voice ask. I looked over to the other side of me and saw a young boy in the bed to my right. He couldn't have been more than 6. Just like the girl, he was pale as death. "Yeah," I said quietly. "I'm sick too." "Did you have an accident too?" he asked. I was silent for a moment before nodding. "Yeah, I had an accident too." Somehow the boy seemed reassured to hear that. "My dad says only babies have accidents. You don't look like a baby." The innocent tone in which he had said that almost made me laugh. No, kid, I'm not a baby. I rested my head on the pillow and tried to breathe. I noticed a blood-red stain beneath the kid and frowned. Did you just have an accident?" The kid was quiet for a moment. "I can't stop," he said after a while. "It hurts all the time, but I can't make it stop." He sounded genuinely embarrassed. Hey, it's not your fault, kiddo. Where's the doctor? Maybe he can get that sheet swapped out for you." "The doctors aren't going to do anything," said a voice to my left. I looked over to see the young woman watching me. "There's no point. He's too far gone. He'll bleed again while they're changing his sheets. And even if he doesn't, he'll just bleed all over the new ones. That's just no reason to let him lie in it." The girl scoffed. "Isn't it?" she asked dryly, before rolling over to look away from me, wincing in pain as she did. I made myself look around the room for the first time. There were 3 other beds on the other side of the room, each with people in them. I saw an elderly man, a middle-aged woman, and a third person who was huddled under the blanket. Even in the low light, I could see red stains on the sheets. I glanced back over to the girl. "What's happening to us?" I asked. "I don't know," she replied without looking at me. "Nobody knows. They're just trying to figure it out." "Nobody's talked to you? You haven't seen a doctor or anything?" She didn't reply, although her body tensed up, and I knew she was suffering the same agony I felt. "The doctors don't usually come in," the boy said. "When they do, they wear funny, crinkly outfits." "Crinkly outfits?" I asked. "Yeah, crinkly and silver. They look like that game on my dad's phone with the spacemen." I frowned, trying to figure out what this kid was talking about. Maybe it was just the agonizing pain I was in, but it didn't exactly click right away. I could feel the painful cramps starting up again, and I knew that there wasn't anything I could do about it this time. At least I was in the hospital. At least I was going to get some help. If you've ever been hospitalized, you know that time really doesn't seem to function anymore. Everything blends together. Day and night no longer have any meaning. Sleep comes on suddenly and leaves just as quickly. I don't remember passing out again. At some point, though, I must have fallen asleep. I remember waking up to the sound of movement in the room with us. My body felt light and dizzy. My insides felt fluttery. The cramps were still there. My bed beneath me was wet, and the stench of my own filth and blood overpowered everything else. I felt cold. "Help me," a voice rasped from the hospital bed across from me. It took more effort than it should have to raise my head and look up. The middle-aged woman in the bed directly across from me was breathing heavily. Her eyes were wild and unfocused. "Please help me." There was movement in the corner of my eye. My vision was hazy, but I looked over to see several figures standing over the little boy's bed. Spacemen. I remember thinking, although my mind was too unfocused to put the proper name to the silver outfits they wore over their clothes, ones that hid even their faces. God, please help me. It hurts, the older woman groaned. Please, make it stop. The figures didn't even look at her. They remained crowded around the little boy's bed. I didn't see any trace of the boy between them, just a white bag that looked like it was made out of some sort of plastic tarp. The older woman across from me groaned in pain. I heard the disgruntled gurgle of her bowels as fresh blood spilled out of her. Please, I can't take it anymore. I felt something on my arm, tickling me. I saw something about the size of a quarter there. In the low light, it took me a few moments to determine just what it was. It was a bug. I mean, it looked like a grub or a caterpillar, only with very large jaws that took up most of its head. I could feel its little legs moving along my skin. It crawled up my arm, and I tried to brush it off, just lifting my hand to do that. It took most of my energy, though. I pushed it, but didn't knock it away. The cramps returned, slightly worse than before. I cried out in pain, but was too weak to flinch. Please, somebody help me! The woman screamed. Help me! From the corner of my eyes, I saw the younger woman in the bed beside me press her pillow over her head to drown out the screams. The door at the far end of the room opened, and 2 more people in full-body suits came in with a gurney. Hazmat suits. The name finally came to me. Hazmat suits. I watched as they wheeled the gurney over to the bed where the young boy had been. A few of the people in hazmat suits moved, allowing me a better view of where the boy had not been long ago. His sheets were more red than white. There was a small shape in the bag, something about his size, and I watched as the 2 figures moved the bag onto the gurney. My heart began to beat faster as my foggy mind began to put the pieces together. Though I'd only briefly spoken to the boy, I still felt a sense of loss. Please! The older woman cried. Although she sounded so far away now, her voice was getting hoarser. My attention was focused solely on watching as the people in the hazmat suits wheeled the boy out. The bug in my arm was still there, and as the last of the people moved to leave, he stopped beside my bed. I could see his face through the visor, but I knew he wasn't looking at me. He was looking at the bug. From his belt, he took out a small test tube and a pair of pliers. I watched as he plucked the bug off my skin and put it into the tube. Then he was gone. He didn't say a word to me. Wait, I asked. My voice was weak. What about her? I tried to gesture to the screaming woman across from me, but the man in the hazmat suit didn't so much as look back. He and the others just disappeared through the door and left us alone. No, don't go. Don't go, help me. Help me, please help me. The woman sobbed. It hurts. Please, just make it stop. Please. The younger woman beside me kept the pillow over her ear, drowning out the desperate screams of our roommate. Please. Her cries yielded nothing. Nobody came for her. It hurts. I heard her whimper over and over again. It hurts. It hurts. Please stop. No. No. She rested a hand on her stomach, tears streaming down her cheeks. She was almost chalk white. Her voice was getting weaker and weaker. No more, she rasped. No more. She slumped back into her bed. Not dead, but not much better off. The girl beside me kept the pillow over her head for a few moments before finally putting it back in place. What's happening to her? I asked, once I was sure she could hear me. Her number's up, the girl replied. I guess the cramps get worse when they're ready to come out. Your little best friend over there was screaming while you were out. I was sure you were going to wake up. What do you mean? I asked. She looked over at me. Her expression grim and yet mocking at the same time. What happened to the kid? I think you know what happened to the kid. I mean, what's wrong with us? I don't know what's wrong with us. But I know we're not leaving this room alive, she replied. I don't know if they can fix it, or if they just don't want to. I don't know what it is. I don't know how we got it or why. But I know they're growing inside of us. What? What's growing inside of us? I demanded, my voice straining. I don't know. Not for sure. But I know they're in our guts. And they're eating their way out. I stared at her. Not sure if she was joking, but I didn't see a single ounce of humor on her face. She slipped her phone out of her pillowcase and turned it on, keeping her back to the door. I snuck this in when they were admitting me, she said, looking up at me. I thought I could at least text my boyfriend. He hasn't been answering. He feels sick too, so maybe he's in another room. Snuck it in. You think they want us to post this shit on the internet? She asked. I was looking it up. Nothing on the news. No idea what these symptoms mean. I thought about maybe posting on Reddit or Twitter, but if they find out that I did it, I can kiss this baby goodbye. And call me selfish. But if I'm gonna die, I'm having a little bit of Wi-Fi up until the end. Might be nice. She chuckled. There was no humor in it. The woman across from us had gone mostly quiet now. Her chest was falling quickly, and I could still hear her muttering to herself, No, no, no. The girl beside me didn't even look up at her. She just scrolled through her phone as if nothing was wrong. Less than half an hour later, the woman across from us had gone quiet. Then the hazmat team returned to take her away. I'm not sure how long it's been. Like I said, time hardly seems to work. They took the person I couldn't see clearly the other night. I think they died in their sleep. The old man is gone as well. All of them have been replaced with new people, new faces, each one of them in pain. Pain that I understand too well. The cramps are here all the time now. I think the next time I fall asleep, I might not wake up. God, I hope I don't wake up. About an hour or so ago, I woke up to feel something under my blanket. I pushed into my hand. Phone. Looking at it, I recognized it as the phone the girl had been using. I was going to ask her why'd she given it to me, but when I looked over, I got my answer. She had jerry-rigged her blanket and tied it to the railing of her bed, then let gravity do the rest. She'd been getting bad over the last few hours. I think she decided that hanging herself was better than the alternative. I think she had the right idea. I remember looking over at her, seeing a grisly red stain against the front of her shirt. Her belly had sagged and split, spilling her entrails out onto the linoleum floor. I could see countless dark spots writhing within her guts. So many little grubs like the one I'd seen on my arm. It had taken the people in the hazmat suits a while to clean everything up, and I suspect there'll be someone new in her bed within the next few hours. The cramps are getting worse. I can feel myself bleeding constantly. I'm gonna die. I'm certain of that now. I'm not asking for help. I'm not even asking for answers. All I want is for people to know what's happening. I want people to know. And maybe someone can figure out what happened to us. Maybe someone else can be helped. I don't know. The world around me feels hazy. I can barely type anymore. I'm so tired. I'm in so much pain. They're coming out. I can feel it. Oh, God. Hey there kids, it's me, MrCreepyPasta, and I just wanted to tell you thank you so much for watching tonight's video, or listening to tonight's episode of the podcast. It really helps me out whenever you guys do things like listen or watch. And it really helps if you guys also subscribe to the podcast or subscribe to the YouTube channel, or do things like clicking the bell or clicking the like button. Tales from the Gas Station is back, in case you guys had missed out on that. Tales from the Gas Station Volume 1 and 2 were different audiobooks that I had done for Jack Townsend a couple of years ago, but in case you missed it at the end of last year, also Tales from the Gas Station Volume 3 is available now on Audible. You can check it out by looking for Tales from the Gas Station or searching for MrCreepyPasta on Audible, or, scroll down to the description and click the links there. And as always, I want to give a very special thank you to all of my supporters on Patreon. You guys are the ones who help me keep the lights on the house, as well as allow me to do things like commission brand new stories. In case you guys haven't noticed, we hit that tier. So, a very special thank you to Jordan Alexander Sanchez, Stricken, Chase Burnett, Deanna Kraus, G Weevil 3, Tristan Pelton, 1-800-Nightmare, Acid System, Aaron Stormcrow, Azurine Fox, Bobby Karman, Chris Lovins, Cryptic Nightmares, The Doctor, Daniel Polson, Dr. Stein and Mr. Happy, Eurogore, Freddy Krueger, Fried Chicken 12, Hades' Nephew, InfernalOne, James Bruce, James Lowe, Jason VR Wilson, JimboTheHutt, Jordan Nells, Jordan Johnson, Caleb Dougal, Kiri the Sloth, Legit Quad Feed, Liam Newman, Lisa Cottrell, Marco Takes Dabs 420, Michael Scharbrough, Nico Kayo, Nina Smith, Prozac and Pancake Appreciation Society, Rafael Rodriguez, Robert White, S-Man, Sky Harbor, Snails Burnett, Talon Karlik, The Ginger Bros, Trace Miles, Tsuji Campbell, Tynannie, Unknown Nobody, Andre Garcia, Brianna Wright, Brian Ace, Caspian, hogunkji, and Someone You Love. And also a very special thank you to everybody who's down there in the description down below. All you guys who are listed as Patreons and everybody who's even supporting for just $1, I really love and appreciate you guys. And if you want to join them, you can always head over to patreon.com/MrCreepyPasta. Even $1 a month, honestly, it keeps the show going. So thank you guys so much. And to everyone out there, sweet dreams.